Welcome to our City Council meeting for June the 27th, 2022. Just a little bit of housekeeping before we get underway. You may have noticed we're a little sparse up here. Well, number one, we're not real sure where Mayor Pro Tem Harvey is. We'll find out soon. Number two, Councilmember Kuntz is virtual, and City Manager Farrell Benavides is virtual as well. In the past, when we have had council members not present but here virtually, by authority that the governor has issued in terms of open meetings, those individuals that are online and stay online, meaning their camera is on at all times. Once that camera goes off, that individual is considered not in the meeting. So with the virtual meetings, Mr. Kuntz will be here. We've had virtual meetings before with the city council members with the ability to vote, I would say with the right to vote. So what we do ask that individual to do is not only speak it, but raise their hand so that we can make sure that City Secretary has a recording of that vote. Okay.
I just need a time, Mayor.
Yes, you do. Timestamp 6:03, thank you. I am exercising a special privilege tonight, which you may see in the future many, many times. I have asked two pastors to come tonight to say our invocation. Both of them, I am proud to say, are friends of mine. And one will be in English, and the other will be in Spanish. And that is something I wish to pursue for our city council in the short term, is to be able to have simultaneous Spanish city council meetings to engage a major portion of our city populace. So with that, first, if you would please stand with me, and Mr. Tommy Nunn from New Life Assembly. Pastor Nunn.
Let's pray. Our great Heavenly Father, God over all and through whom we, your people, gain victory, we come before your throne of grace today, and we pray that you would show favor upon the people of our city through our leadership, through our mayor and our city council, and that you would guide them as they lead our city with wisdom and guidance from your Spirit. I pray that you would direct them in the path that is best for our future, and that you would help them to operate with understanding and guidance by your hand. May you, O Lord, stretch forth your hand to lead all of us into the future that you have designed for us, and that we would walk together in unity and strength to be a city set on a hill that cannot be hid. And I ask this of you today, that you would bless our city with your presence and your love in the mighty name of Jesus, and that you would show your power and might and your glory in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen.
Dear Father God, bendito Padre Celestial, te agradecemos la oportunidad que tú nos das de estar aquí en esta tarde. Gracias, Señor, porque sabemos que tú nos has brindado este día tan especial para la ciudad, para nuestra comunidad. Y te pido, Padre Santo, por tu bendición sobre la vida de mi hermano mayor, Gordon, cada uno de los council members de la ciudad, Señor. Te pido para que tú les das sabiduría, dirección y guianza. Te pido por protección sobre sus vidas y sus familias. Líbralos de todo peligro. Pero sobre todo te pido, Señor Dios, que tú les das sabiduría y entendimiento para hacer, Señor Dios, lo que es justo y lo que es correcto delante de tus ojos, y les das el valor para vivir conforme a ellos. Padre, ellos están en tus manos. En el nombre de Cristo Jesús, in the precious name of Jesus Christ. Amen.
I forgot to admit, this is Pastor Jaime Andrade, and he is from Centro Familiar Cristiano Church up on Cedar Ridge Road. Thank you. Please join me in pledges to our flags. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Honor the Texas flag. I pledge allegiance to thee, Texas, one state, under God, one and indivisible. Please be seated. The next item on our agenda is item 1A, which is canvass and election of oaths. Item 1A for the City Council to consider resolution canvassing and declaring the results of the runoff election of municipal officers held June 18th, 2022. For information to our citizens, this is a formal process that is prescribed by the state of Texas in terms of how oaths are taken and even how these individual votes are recorded into archives. So with that, you're going to hear a long kind of a reading from our city attorney, and then that is the actual the resolution the council will vote on, and that becomes part of our city archive. So just making sure that we have Councilmember Kuntz, and he's always ready available. We have City Attorney Hager and City Manager Aretha Farrell-Benavides. So item 1A, consider resolution canvassing and declaring the results of the runoff election of municipal officers held June 18th, 2022. City Attorney Hager, the floor is yours, sir.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. Resolution 22.
Mr. Hager, can you start over and maybe speak closer to your mic? We can barely hear you. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. How's that? Is that better?
Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you. Resolution 2022-0.
We need to Mr. Hager, we are having technical difficulties, and the import of this particular resolution is not something that I think we can overlook. We need to hear the city attorney read every one of these words. IT folks or AV, do we have any kind of fix or recommendation on what we should do? Or just try again with Mr. Hager?
Mayor, I don't think I think it's the internet on Mr. Hager's, because you all are fine.
Okay, so.
Maybe the best thing to do is have the city secretary.
I even missed that. I can see that there's quite a delay between Mr. Hager's speech and the words coming out.
He said have the city secretary to read it for us.
I'm reading the entire resolution, correct, Mr. Hager?
Correct.
Okay. Resolution 2022-50, a resolution of the City Council of the City of Duncanville, Texas, canvassing and declaring the results of the June 18, 2022 runoff for the general election for office of the mayor and providing an effective date. Whereas it is hereby found and determined that notices of a runoff election were duly given in the form, manner, and time required by law, and said elections were in all respects legally held and conducted in accordance with applicable laws of the state of Texas and the proceedings calling and governing the holding of such elections. And whereas it is imperative to consider the results of the runoff election held on June 18, 2022 for the purpose of electing the hereinafter named official before the qualified voters of the city, and whereas the returns of the runoff election have been duly and legally made and submitted to the City Council for canvassing and a tabulation of the returns for the polling places for the early voting and canvassed and tabulated by this governing body. Now, therefore, be it resolved by the City Council of the City of Duncanville, Texas, after examining said returns and opening and canvassing the votes of said election, that the results of said runoff election are as follows. Section 1, that the following number of votes were cast for the following named candidate for the office of mayor, to wit: name, Mark D. Cooks. Early votes in person by mail, 823. Election day votes in person by mail, 251. Total votes, 1,074. Barry L. Gordon. Early votes in person by mail, 917. Election day votes in person by mail, 352. Total votes, 1,269. It appearing that Barry L. Gordon received a majority of all votes cast for the office of mayor, Barry L. Gordon is hereby declared to be elected to serve a 2-year term after qualifying and taking the oath of office. Section 2, This resolution declaring the results of the municipal election shall become effective immediately after its passage. It is ordered that this canvass, a declaration of results of said election, shall be entered into the minutes of the city council, and that the officers of the office of mayor, after being qualified and having taken the oath during the term commencing June 27th, 2022, and therefore until the successor is duly elected and qualified. Duly passed by the City Council of the City of Duncanville, Texas, this the 27th day of June 2022.
Thank you, City Secretary and Mr. Hager, for consenting to have it read that in particular fashion. City Council members, the resolution before us is as read. We do need to take a vote on it. Chair will entertain a motion to approve.
Motion to approve.
Hopefully, thankfully. Thank you very much. Motion to approve by Mr. McBurnett, second by Mayor Pro Tem Mr. Harvey. Council, please vote.
And Mr. Coons, if
And
you
Mr.
could raise your hand and turn on your mic and say if you're for or against, please.
For.
Thank you. The vote is unanimous. Thank you very much for your vote of confidence as well, City Council. The next item on the agenda is the formality of my taking the oath. It says the candidate receiving the majority of the votes for their respective districts will be sworn in by the city secretary, after which each will take a seat on the dais. Formal language we just have to use, even though some of it does not apply.
Aaron? Okay. I just also wanted to say really quick that usually when we do a swearing in, we do pause for a 10-minute break for cupcakes. However, we're not doing that this time. Mayor Gordon requested no, and Miss Aretha Farrell Benavides is going to give him a celebration later on. So do not think that I don't want to feed him a cupcake, okay?
I, Barry L. Gordon,
Do solemnly swear
or affirm
that I will faithfully
execute the duties
of
the office of mayor
of the city of Duncanville,
of the city of Duncanville,
state of Texas,
state of Texas,
and will to the best of my ability
and will to the best of my ability
preserve, protect, and defend
the Constitution
and the laws of the United States
and the laws of the United States
and of this state,
and of this state.
so help me God.
So help me God. No cupcakes, because I'm going to talk. Which, yeah, I got 3 minutes. I imposed the 3-minute rule. It's a distinct honor and a privilege to be voted into a third term in the great city of Duncanville. And I want to thank all of our city council members and all the city staffs, city manager, all the directors, our first responders, our firefighters, our law enforcement, our code, everyone involved with that. And most importantly, my wife and I want to thank our friends and our neighbors and those who have supported me in this. There have been a lot of days, many days, more than 2 hands and 2 toes, that I really wondered. But in those times of concern for myself, I got texts, I got emails, I got phone calls from people like you saying, Barry, it's okay. I don't know about anybody else, but you don't do this job without God. There's no possible way, because of the wisdom and the guidance that only He has, and what He foresees for the future for each of us individually and for this municipality. Only He can give that. I'm really thankful for our panel, for our city council. These are people of faith as well. We fly our faith under different flags, but the bottom line is we believe in the Lord Jesus Christ, and binds us together. So we don't have a problem with having an invocation at our city council meetings. That's because we believe it's necessary to do that. I've just had it. What Marlis and I do as a team is indescribable. This August will be 52 years that we've been a team. Everything we've done, everything. Well, a lot earlier for her, but when I got saved, I was 20 years old before I got saved. She was saved a long time before that. But when we bound ourselves together and understood that our lives are committed to the Lord, everything that we have done has been in obedience to His word. It's really a spiritual thing. And regardless of your belief in that aspect of what is spiritual, all I can say is the Lord God Jesus Christ is unimaginable in His power and His might and His wisdom for what He does. This is terrible. I want to briefly thank my opponent, Mark Cooks, for conducting a creditable campaign as well. I wrote this stuff so small I can't see it.
Let's see. Where are your glasses? Oh, okay. There we go.
No being ashamed when you need them, is it? So I want to tell a little story that is inspired by my wife. I got a phone call one day from an elderly lady here in our city, and she had a daughter, and they had a real problem. It was like a utility kind of a problem. So I told my wife, I said, let's go visit her, let's go knock on the door and talk to her. Sure enough, we walked over and knocked on the door, and I said, hi, I'm Barry Gordon, I'm your mayor, and this is my wife. And she said, you're not the mayor. The mayor would not come to my house. I said, yes, I am the mayor. This is my wife, and we're here to talk to you. And from that moment of understanding that this person holding this title has a responsibility to engage, and that's what my wife and I do. I get texts and emails and phone calls 24/7, but that's the joy of the job. It's the joy of the job. And what I've always wanted to do when I took this seat was to open lines of communication. And whether those communications are positive or negative makes no difference to me. Communication is communication. And that's what I am so thankful for, that there is a community that does respond and sees what's necessary, and they let us know stuff. But the bottom line to that particular conversation with that lady was, my wife hugged her and said, honey, there are no bigger little people in the city of Duncanville. We're family. It's a family. I'm looking around. It's just cool stuff. When you run out of words, you just go mumble, right? So I want to let you know that the next 2 years, I pledge to do my very, very best for every single issue that we have come before us. It's going to be what's best for the outcome of this entire city. I vote with my heart and my conscience in everything that I do. And I pledge that to you. That's what you will see in votes that I take and comments that I make on certain issues. A couple of key things that I think we ought to mention that happened in the last 4 years of my tenure as mayor is that we have sought year after year after year to increase the salaries of our first responders. That's necessary. Number one, because they're worth it. But number two is equitability. It's part of the aspect of retention. We can't forego that. That's what we need to continue to do and need to continue to seek. As it affected you personally, for the past 4 years, we have reduced our tax rate to keep you as whole as possible. How long we can continue to do that, we do not know. But as we enter into the budget season, actually tonight, we'll see how far we can and cannot pursue any further reductions in the tax rate. We all know what we are being affected by what's going on here in the Metroplex and even the United States in terms of the inflationary aspect on our property taxes. We do not control that, even though a lot of people would say, what are you going to do with my property taxes? And the answer is, it's not to me. But what we do is we examine our tax rate to ensure it's the best possible rate that we can give you to your advantage while still providing enough income to the city to operate efficiently and properly. We had Snowmageddon, we had COVID, and because we are a city of resiliency and citizens that still know their neighbors, we came through all of them. Snowmageddon, nobody could have predicted what was going to happen with that. We were unprepared in terms of, here's a contingency plan. Oh yeah, we're going to have 2-degree weather for the next 6 days, and I just wonder how many pipes are going to break around the city, how many telephone poles are going to come down, how many transformers are going to blow. Maybe we thought about it, but there wasn't a contingency plan to say. And I'm not sure anybody in the state of Texas was really prepared for that. Maybe up in Abilene or something where they get it, but not here. But our people, our law enforcement, our firefighters, our staff here in the building were tireless in making sure during Snowmageddon that people were not disrupted, their lives were not disrupted to a significant degree. You may not know it, but we had staff members sleeping in this building, never going home. We took hotel rooms in the city for those first responders and individuals that needed to sleep. We took those individuals and we took care of them. We're always watching out, and we're doing our very best for that. And I'm sure on the back of everyone's mind is what happened last Monday in our city. Tragedy? Yes. All I will say is that you evidenced what preparation and practice does. Where's our future? What are some of the things on my agenda? Now, I understand as well that no one person pushes anything into the city. It takes a vote of this entire council. But there's a couple of things I really think that we need to press on in some sense of urgency for me. First one is, what can we do to bring more businesses into the city? We have a very, very aggressive office of, what's it, development services now, right? And it's an office of really like 2.5. Encore, see? It happens. Call Govan. Okay. But we, with, yeah, I know, get the hook. Get the hook, yeah, it's danger time. But with Gus Garcia and Clay Mansell and Brandy, is it right? Yeah. Those are all, that's our entire economic development staff, folks. 3 people. And you think of the workload that sits on their shoulders, but you see the development, you see what's happening as a result of that. So we're going to continue to look for businesses because we have a little bit of space left to go. What's that one saying? Oh. I am the chair of the Transportation Committee for the Best Southwest Partnership. I also serve on the Regional Transportation Council for the North Central Texas Council of Governments, which puts me into transportation issues to a very great deal. One of the things that we've talked about, not personally, but this city has talked about for maybe eons, is mass transit. What does it take? What will it cost? And where can we put it? Well, there's one obvious reason. It's sitting right out there. You know, the trains run back and forth on it 4 times a day. Here's some numbers because we need, this is where the budget comes into play. Light rail, Light rail is dark. It's the electric cars and so forth. Light rail runs $60 million a mile. We would connect to Westmoreland Station, which is 7.6 miles away. Call it 8. What are we talking about? Over $500 million. Now we could go cheaper, and that's called commuter rail. And commuter rail is what runs between the big diesels that run in between Dallas between Dallas and Fort Worth. That's called commuter rail. Those are commuter cars. It's cheaper because you don't have all the electrical lines put up. It's only $40 million a mile. So what do we do? And I even asked Senator West the question. I asked a couple of representatives from our legislature, what do we do? And the answer is, you can ask for money for mass transit, but your answer is going to be no. And I said, well, I'm not stopping there. So what I did, I got a hold of my compatriots, my co-workers, the mayor of Duncanville, I am, the mayor of DeSoto, the mayor of Cedar Hill, and the mayor of Lancaster, and I formed a collaboration between the 4 mayors. And what we are doing, what I'm drafting, is a letter that's going to go to the governor and to go to the Secretary of Transportation to say, look at us, look at this expansion of population in southern Dallas County. We need mass transit. It is beyond the affordability of any municipality to pull that off of that. That's one of the things I'm be working on. Bike and hike trails. There's a perfect spot for the completion of a bike and hike trail, and that's the green space underneath the Encore power lines that runs from Clark Road east over into DeSoto. I've had this on my agenda for a while, but I feel now is the opportune time to see what we can do to make this happen, to push it through our Parks and Rec Board and then to bring it to council. This is something that we will be talking about very, very soon. And as I mentioned earlier, I am really quite serious about finding the ability, whatever it would take in terms of hardware and personnel, to bring us simultaneous Spanish translation of our city council meetings. That came through to myself and my wife during this last campaign, to seeing that and understanding it as well. So just wanted to let you know those things. In closing, Coffee with the Mayor will continue. However, I've received input that maybe it ought to be at a different time. So we're looking at, I'm going out to some of the folks that show up and say, what would you prefer? Want to keep it from 8:30 to 9:30, or should we go somewhere around, late lunch, early lunch, something like that? But it's going to stay. I started that back in 2018, and it is not going to go away. So are we a perfect city? Not by a long shot. Do we attempt to be perfect? Not by a long shot. Because if you attempt to be perfect, what's the result of that? Frustration. We have a staff, we have a council that it does not exhibit frustration because we know outcomes. We can search outcomes, we can reveal outcomes, we can discuss outcomes, and we can make a decision on those outcomes. So whatever problems we have, and we're honest enough to say we've got a few, we work very, very hard to resolve those as quickly as possible, and as both physical and fiscal resources permit. If you heard any of our weekly reports, we're short-staffed on our infrastructure. We're constantly seeking for new people. So with that, I think I've credited my 3 minutes to how far? Long time, okay? When they do their oaths, they can talk as long as they want. Never stop them. But my wife and I want to express our deepest appreciation to our supporters, to those that prayed for us, who have been my encouragement and brought me through this time. Thank you very much, and God bless you all. All right. Let me just ask, first of all, City Secretary, do we have any citizens' input?
No, sir.
And we have no citizen comments submitted either.
No, sir.
Okay, so we will dispense with item number 3 on the agenda. Now, citizens, I do have to tell you that the subject matter that we will be discussing in executive session also applies to what will be coming up later on the agenda. So as you know, my practice is, or we look at it and say, how long is the executive session going to take? Do we take it now or do we take it at the end? This particular executive session must occur now. So I'm saying that to beg your indulgence and your patience. We are going to leave the dais, go into our briefing room for executive session, and be back just as soon as possible. We're going to recess City Council. The timestamp is 6:32. We have Mr. Hager, we have our city manager, and we have Mr. Coons. Is that correct? Yes, sir. All right, we're reconvening City Council. The timestamp is 7:06. Thank you very much. A citizen's comment card has been handed to me, and of course, I can choose to accept it or not, but anytime we hear from a citizen, it's a good thing. So we're going to go ahead and accept that. So I have to read the stuff that goes with it too. Pursuant to section 551.007 of the Texas Government Code, any member of the public has the opportunity to address the City Council concerning any matter of public business or any posted agenda item. However, the act prohibits the City Council from deliberating in issues not on the public agenda, and such non-agenda items may be referred to city staff for research and any future action. All persons addressing are subject to council-adopted rules and limitations permitted by law. And the rules and limitations of the Duncanville City Council are that you have 2 minutes to talk, and when you come forward, please state your name and address for the record. So the individual is Mari Vega.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you for recognizing me, and thank you all of council members and Ms. Downs and supporting staff and our people in uniform. Thank you all for making this public speaking thing possible.
So
thank you to everybody.
For the record, you need to state your name and address.
Oh, excuse me, sorry. I'm Mari Vega. I live at 611 Oriole Boulevard in one of the condos there. Phase 1, the older units, and I'm sorry if this is booming. My comment has to do with just a kind of a general urging of green space, green thinking, getting that Land Nature Preserve on lock. No question, no further question. There have been some mowings there. I don't know if y'all are aware of that or not, but it's unfortunate because everything is just now toasted, barren, as it once was. In the springtime, there had been wildflowers and all those things. Mr. Mark Graham makes beautiful pictures, of which I'm sure some of y'all have at least seen some of them.
I'm going to need you to cut you off for 2 minutes.
Oh, what's that?
What's your timer?
I have it. Yes, thank you. Furthermore, I wanted to just go further, that we have no more daylight colored streetlights, that we have that we put ways for the gutters and mark those so people know that what goes down that drain goes into the creek, goes into the Trinity River. I've lived here 20 some years almost. The Trinity River as such barely made a dent in my thinking until I became Christian, praise God. That we have this thing. I think we need to show more respect for it collectively as a city. I think we all could do that. I'd just like to see, just really firmly, no doubt, no further question, that that's what this is, that's important to City of Duncanville, City of Champions. Thank you for letting me speak to y'all.
Thank you. Moving on to item number 4A. Well, let's see. This is individual consideration. Consider appointments with the Duncanville Economic Development Corporation Board. There's no action to be taken on that as a result of executive session.
And Mayor, the item has been moved to July 5th.
Got it, thank you. Item 4B, request for reimbursement for American Rescue Plan Act, parens ARPA, Emergency Business Assistance Program grants for qualified Duncanville small businesses. On this particular item, Councilmember Vera Cruz has declared himself to be there some conflict of interest for small business, so he's going to recuse himself from this particular item. Just so everyone is aware, this is a normal standard procedure. In fact, we honor Mr. Vera Cruz for bringing that to our attention to recuse himself from this particular decision. And Mr. Vera Cruz will be totally out of earshot of anything that goes on here, just so everyone is aware of that. All right, Mr. Garcia.
Good evening, Mayor, City Council members. Augustine Garcia, Managing Director for Development Services. Accompanying me today is Mr. Clay Manzel, Manager of Development Services. Just to give a little bit of background, Mayor and Council, the ARPA, which is the American Recovery Protection Act, which was passed by the Biden administration, during the COVID-19 pandemic, small businesses faced a significant economic crisis. And due to the nature of the pandemic, with lockdowns and COVID mitigation requirements, businesses had a significant trouble economically and had to scale back operations. I'm sorry? Oh, sorry, I heard a voice. And so one of the things that we were trying to accomplish was we wanted to be inclusive. We wanted to get as many businesses to participate in this program. I know the council was very interested in getting people to apply. The prior application process with the CARES Act, we didn't have a whole lot of success, and a lot of the businesses felt it was an arduous process. So this time around, we changed it up a little bit, and we tried to get as many people as we could to apply and go from there. As you're aware, the program is designed to assist small businesses. We had the Paycheck Protection Act during the CARES Act process, and only about 50% of small businesses in America actually applied, and still 80% of those businesses didn't receive confirmation that they had received loan or they had received assistance. And we knew that was a problem. So we set out to make this extremely inclusive, and we set out some of the powers that the federal government allowed us to utilize to get people to apply. Now, even though we have some that have been approved that are sitting in the papers before you, it doesn't necessarily mean they're completed. We still need to make sure and verify the documentation they provided is accurate when they come in and when those checks are dispersed. And of course, it'll be through our department as well as through finance for final approval and disbursement of checks. Our program was intended to cut through the red tape and get assistance into the hands of small business owners without the bureaucratic requirements that we experienced in the past, and had disincentivized so many businesses from getting the assistance they need. So the whole process was to try and get those monies that we got from the federal government into the business community within Duncanville, and that really was the process behind all of this. The application portal was opened in March 8th of 2022. Initial estimates were close to the application portal early mid-May. Staff was initially estimating about 30 applicants. So far, we have received 59 total, which we're really excited about. We felt like we had a very robust application process. The portal was closed June 2nd. We still have monies available, so we could reopen it if we so choose. 59 applications totaling $463,750 in assistance. There's $700,000 available, as you're aware. 42 were verified to be qualified Duncanville small businesses. 7 could not be verified by their application alone, and additional information was requested. Those are still pending. 10 were disqualified for various reasons. 7 were duplicate applications. 3 were businesses that were not located within Duncanville, nor did they have registered office addresses within the state as being located there. Now, we try to take an objective approach based on the criteria that we're going to present before you. And so Mr. Manzel has done a phenomenal job, if I do say so myself, in tracking all of those businesses. And based on the application, the data was downloaded, and Mr. Manzel will show you that if you need, if you so choose, to show what the objective process was. I'm sure there may be questions on that. But the eligibility criteria were to be officially registered with the state, physically located and operating with Duncanville city boundaries, be current in the payment of all tax obligations of the city of Duncanville, begin conducting business as of or during 2020 when the pandemic started, have no more than 100 employees, generate at least $35,000 in revenue annually to be verified once they come in, have closed or suffered loss during the pandemic due to COVID-19, and we can answer any questions on any questions you may have as far as how we're going to verify those. The maximum grant amount was $15,000. So even if they had qualified for multiple categories, the max would be $15,000. So these were the criteria: $2,500 per full-time employee. So they would be eligible for at least $2,500 for all full-time employees that were impacted. $1,250 for part-time employees. That's just simply cut in half. Up to 100% of 12 months lease payments, utilities, renting, or purchase of business equipment existing in the during 2020 to present. So that means is if they had purchased, for example, $50,000 in new equipment, or they had $50,000 in lease payments, they still could only qualify for $15,000 max, but we would get all of that information. Payment of existing business-related loans for equipment, vehicles, reimbursement for expenses to mitigate COVID-19 in the workplace. For instance, if they purchase anything like your panels that you see in front of you now, if they purchase PPE or anything that would be mitigating the COVID-19 exposure. And then if they had to start up or they had to close down, $5,000 for restart up capital for businesses that were forced out of business due to COVID-19. As an example, if a business could prove or verify that they had to close down, whether it be through verification by their landlord, verification through ceasing operations, through either banknotes or through some sort of letters of closure or examples, those are the things we would look at. Upon approval, prior to disbursement, applicants will need to provide final documentation, payroll employee documentation to verify employee count, whether it be a W-2, 1099, 941 payroll report, or tax returns. Lapse in certificate of occupancy, notarized letter from a landlord, or other documentation providing disruption, closure of business operations. In front of you is the documentation and our recommendation for this council to approve for the ARPA funding. That's all I have. Mr. Manzel is here to provide a presentation, if you so choose, to show the objective nature in which we made our selections.
Well, one question I have, and then Mr. Harvey. If an individual received an SBA small business loan during COVID, if they received monies from the PPP and various other opportunities that small businesses had during that COVID time, do any of those other receipts of money disqualify them from this disbursement under ARPA?
No, it doesn't. The qualifications that were presented to the council by the federal government did not exclude any of those, did not list any of those disqualifications, so we didn't add those to our process.
Well, it would, the question really comes from the federal side. If the federal side, or the PPP, or Homeland Security, whatever, had instituted any of those preclusions, I guess somewhere it had been seen. I just wanted to make sure that we have no problems with that.
That's correct.
Okay, Mr. Harvey, sir.
Okay, thank you, Mayor. I don't have a question, but I do have a comment per se. I do agree, after looking over the material that staff provided, that there was a very heartening response from the small business community here in Duncanville to apply for the assistance, and hopefully they will have submitted all the necessary paperwork so that they will be able to get this assistance. So, good job so far.
Thank you.
Mr. Contreras.
Yes. Do you know how many of these on this list are currently open and operating?
I want to say that all of the existing businesses on there are currently open and operating.
Okay, but someone could qualify if they had to close down because of
That's correct,
COVID?
yes.
Okay, but
Yes.
You're not aware of any on this list?
I'm not aware of any that are not currently operating.
Okay.
But they are all registered with the state of Texas as a business and a going concern.
All right, thank you. Businesses that have residential addresses, do they qualify, or do you need to be in a business zone district?
That is a decision above our pay grade. It's certainly a question that has come up. We would ask for direction and advisement on that particular issue.
Can we ask the attorney?
Yes, absolutely.
Do you have any applicants in that category?
Yes, we do.
All right.
We have, I believe we have two, if I'm not mistaken. We have two applicants that have home-based businesses.
I count three.
They would not qualify for the business shutdown because it would be a little bit difficult for them to say their business shut down when their home would still be.
Yeah, I'm not trying to exclude them, I just want to know, but can we ask the attorney that question?
Yes.
Yes, it's my understanding after reading the regulations that you have to have a place of business other than your home.
Okay, so it sounds like we need to check into that.
So,
Well, I'm not
the-
sure what I heard.
Okay.
Can you, Mr. Hager, can you repeat what you said, please, sir?
It's my understanding after reading the regulations that you have to have a place of business other than your home.
So the regulations stipulate traditional businesses, and we see traditional business as being a brick and mortar business, to Mr. Hagar's point. So we believe that means a home outside, a home-based business, but it's not exactly specific. But it does say traditional businesses, which we interpret that to be a business outside the home,
Okay.
possibly.
Yeah, I'm a little bit concerned about that because I think we use the word traditional, but we know there's a lot of businesses that when people are independent, they may run them, real estate agents, for instance, they could run a business out of their home and not have an office. So I don't want to, deny anybody on this basis, but it sounds to me like right now, they wouldn't qualify.
I think what our responsibility is to follow the letter of the law.
Okay.
Without interpretation. So a cottage industry business, somebody operating out of someone's home, based on what Mr. Hager said, our city attorney, they would be disqualified from consideration.
Duly noted.
All right, thank you.
Let's see, Mr. McBurnett, sir.
Thank you, Mayor. Could you go back one slide, please, the last item? And it says upon approval, prior to disbursement, applicants will need to provide financial documentation. Who's in charge of reviewing that information?
So we'd have two processes. Obviously, they would submit it to us. We would review it to see if it was something satisfactory to verify. It would be some sort of formal document or maybe an attestation, an affidavit. And then after we submitted for approval, we would submit, and through the city manager's approval, we would submit to finance. Finance has their own process that they would follow as well. And then final disbursement would be through finance.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. So the information presented before us in terms of the action is consensus to approve or vote for approval?
We would request a vote for approval from City Council.
Just wanted to make sure. So, City Council, we have before us a recommendation, a request for reimbursement with all the background and activity in the package, what we have for City Council. Is there a motion to approve?
A question before we move?
Yes, sir.
So this decision tonight would actually be the final decision regarding these applicants?
Yes, Council Member. The idea and thought behind this was to get this money obviously into the community.
Yeah.
But we understand that in the past, we had very difficult time getting people to apply. So the process was to try and get them in. Once we get them in,
which you did.
we'll get the approval.
Yeah.
Now we're going to help them get through that process.
Okay. So is there any more validating or vetting of the information they provided you all?
At this point, no. I think that ourselves as well as finance has the direction that we need in order to move forward.
Okay.
Okay, and, go ahead.
Well, it's only a concern because we saw on a national scale some of the numbers that came in that showed that a lot of applicants during the height of COVID were actually fraudulent. And you've done some vetting on this, and thank you for that. But knowing that this is the only time we'll be checking on this, we know that we're still open for possible misinformation that's been provided to you. There's no getting around that.
In that regard, I would defer to the attorney on how he would recommend or suggest that we move forward with the process.
I don't have a problem with moving forward. I just want to note that, that we've gone as far as we can go with vetting this, but it doesn't mean that we've done an extensive investigation into the applications.
So with that comment, if it pleases the council, maybe we can show you a bit about what our vetting process looked like. And it was objective and through data that we received.
One comment, Councilmember Contreras, understanding that while they have done the vetting in terms of putting it up against the requirements set forth by the administration with ARPA, there still has to be some oversight accomplished by our folks in terms of looking at, as it said here, provide documentation, look at tax returns, and so forth. So, well, all we're doing tonight is approving these individuals that appear to be qualified based on their vetting for them to proceed with the further investigation of those individuals.
That was my first question, so thank you for clarifying that. And I'll make a motion that we approve.
Okay.
If I could just, one last comment to that point. A part of this is, I'm sorry.
There's a saying, when you struck oil, stop digging, right?
But part of those before you tonight, we have requested certificate of occupancies. We've checked with the state comptroller, our sales tax consultant, and so we have used those mechanisms also to verify them before they came to you tonight. So.
Very good. We have a motion on the floor to approve by
Second.
Councilmember Contreras, a second by Mr. Max Burnett. Council, please vote.
And Councilmember Kuntz, if you can turn on your mic and say if you're for or against.
For.
Thank you, sir.
Very well. That is unanimously approved by those present. Could someone inform Mr. Veracruz that he may re-enter? Mr. Keys, I see that. Thank you very much. I'll wait for Mr. Veracruz to come back in before we proceed. Thank you. Thank you. Mr. Veracruz has returned. Timestamp is 7:26. Moving on to item number 4C. Council, consider a resolution approving the award of the City Council and other public meetings broadcasting, social media live streaming, and non-indexed video hosting to Swagit Productions, LLC, through the Interlocal Purchase System, Contract 190703, for an initial term of 3 years for an estimated amount of $132,064. The award also includes 2 one-year options for an estimated $51,600. The contract's total value, including the initial term plus option, is 5 years for an estimated $183,664. Turning this information item, or this item over to us, is Chief Information Officer Gwendolyn Spencer. Ms. Spencer.
Good evening, Council, Mayor, City Manager, audience. We know that the whole purpose of streaming is for transparency and accountability and allowing citizens to participate in our local government. We also know that of May 10th, we lived through a devastating event. Our mics didn't work. We were unable to broadcast. We went through a lot of things. So we began to look at a solution. The solution that we're bringing before you is not because we have not tried to fix the current system. Our current system has been upgraded. We have spent money since 2019 to upgrade it. We actually hired digital resources to come out and upgrade our system. At that time, we put in some components to update the cameras. We did the displays as well as the displays in the briefing room. So a lot of technology went into it, but it doesn't all talk. I like to say we have salty gumbo. We have a lot of hands in the pot, and it's going to take us a while to undo what we've done. So we're coming before you with a proven method that's used by other cities and school districts to broadcast, to ensure that we give our members of our community, our constituents, the opportunity to participate in government. In addition to that, out of all the money we spent, we did not update our voting system, and our agenda still needs to be addressed. So there are things that still need to be done, but we're asking for you to look at this solution that's currently in some cities and school districts.
Ms. Spencer, just to be clear, the voting system you're talking about is that one?
Yes, sir.
Because we just came out, I don't want people to think that we're talking about county elections or anything.
No, we're talking about the system for video streaming and the system that you see to my left. So with me tonight, I have Swagit here so that you can ask them questions about their system, what it can do. We've even inquired about what the mayor just presented to us about what we can do for Spanish speakers. I also have the director, managing director of finance, because this has to be financed, and we're suggesting that it come out of PEG funds, but there is only $80,000 in PEG funds right now. For your viewing, I've listed the cities that currently utilize this system. Our sister city, DeSoto, and it's working very well. I will say, because I live there, that is how I participated through COVID, and it's a very sound system, as well as in Lancaster, Midlothian, and the school district.
Mr. Harvey has a question.
Just to add to your list, Bulk Springs already has it, and Wilmer is looking at it as well.
Thank you. So we're here for any questions. I can have Swagit come up and tell you what they will be providing. What we will still be providing is making sure that the audio works. We will be also assisting with when we have members that need to communicate via Zoom, but the bulk of it will be done by Swagit, and part of their contract or their service level agreement is it's going to work the same way every time. So we're going to have a reliable system that works and the constituents can depend on it.
So this is a question for the Swagit folks, a little out of Ms. Spencer's wheelhouse. In terms of implementation for this feature, to be able to do this, the division between hardware, software, and AV, how does that break down?
Yeah, so good evening, Council, Mayor. My name is Natasha Ross, and I am with Swagit Productions. So what we are proposing is that it is a multi-broadcast solution. Thank you. It will consist of 5 cameras, so there will be 4 cameras in this room and 2 in the briefing room. The software that is also included with the solution, the monthly managed services, is a hands-free ease AVR system. And what that means is that Swagit staff sets your record times on your recorder based on your meeting schedule. We timestamp your meeting by agenda item so that residents can come back 3 to 4 hours from the end of the meeting and they can watch the archive meeting. That has greatly enhanced with writing minutes. So there's a lot of internal benefits as well as to the public. We will integrate the agenda document into the video player. There's some communication features in there as well, but we'll also remotely operate your cameras from Dallas, Texas. So right at 635 and 75, we'll be sitting there at the office, not myself, but we have a rather large staff that is directing the cameras from our headquarters. We are doing that for the list that Gwendolyn just shared with you guys, but we do that for over 250 government entities across the United States, and the farthest one is Yellowknife, Canada, which is in the Northwestern Territories. So we remotely direct those cameras. We put lower third graphics on the bottom of the video to show the date, the time, and the item that you guys are speaking about. That's done real time, so residents can see that if they're tuning into the live stream later. We also will provide social media extreme, which is where we're streaming to Facebook and YouTube at the same time, as well as to your website. So that way your residents get 3 levels of distribution. Should any one of those social media, take something down, we've heard of that, for copyright infringement, things like that, you always have that reliable live stream on your website. So we'll host all the content for you guys. It's completely hosted.
So does this impact our bandwidth? Are we going to have to increase our bandwidth?
Great question. So it's one connection from the city to our CDN, and then our CDN mirrors out that live stream to all the additional end users. So we're basically offloaded the bandwidth onto Swagit. We're doing all of that heavy lifting. The one connection.
So the answer is yes.
Yes.
We're going to need more bandwidth.
Yeah. No. You do not need more bandwidth. No, the answer is we provide that extra bandwidth. The company does. So it's one connection from here to our CDN, and then our CDN, our content delivery network, mirrors out that live stream to all the additional end users so that it's taking our bandwidth, not yours.
Okay. So if we have, let's say, worst case, well, we've had like 20 people that are online. They're all in the lobby waiting to come on through Zoom. Mm-hmm. So them consuming all bandwidth plus anything going on here, plus pushing out to all the social media, we don't need any more bandwidth.
I mean, what we can do is a speed test to make sure, but typically we need about 8 megabytes upload speed, and that's not a lot.
That's nothing.
I know. It's pretty incredible. And we lock you in at your annual rates for the life of the contract. A lot of companies will do 3 to 5% annual increases, and your contract, you'll be locked in for that rate for the life of the contract.
All you need is 8 megabytes? My worst day, I'm getting like 280 over 310, or the other way around, 310 over 280.
Right. And it is the upload speed that we need, not the download. And then, yeah, everything else is offloaded onto Swagit. So we provide an embed code into your website. That embed code has a live stream and all your archives, and that's where your residents can click on, but that's off of our servers.
Okay. Mr. McBurnett, sir.
Thank you, Mayor. Mr. Coons has his hand up, so why don't you let him go first, and then I have a question.
Thank you for catching that. Thank you, Mr. Coons.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you, Councilmember McBurnett. I have a couple of things. First of all, on this current slide, the very last sentence there, so the contract's total value, including initial term plus option, is 5 years for $183,000. Is that right?
Ms. Spencer, that answer would come from you, I believe.
We're saying yes. We have the Chief Procurement Officer coming up. He actually was negotiating up to Friday, so I prefer that he verifies that number.
Good evening, council members. Yeah, actually, the first part of it, the 3 years price, includes the hardware, which we do one-time payment that we're going to meet on those ones. But for the optional years, those are just for the services, for $51,600.
So with the potential for renewing of the contract procurement-wise, those renewal amounts are included in the value of the contract, even though they may not be executed until some point where the expiration occurs?
Yes, sir.
Thank you. Any other questions? Mr. McBurnett?
Thank you, Mayor. And it relates towards the payment and stuff. I'm imagining this is not a budgeted item. So could we address how that is being paid?
No, sir, it is not currently budgeted, but there are monies monies that we get from our franchise fee, money set aside for just this sort of thing in order to upgrade our capital equipment in order to deliver communications to public broadcasting. So the funds are there. They are not appropriate at this time, so you will see that coming back to you as a budget amendment to appropriate those funds for this fiscal year. An upcoming budget, you will see this in the budget for 23 as an item in the PEG fund. And that is kind of a new fund. We were setting those monies in a fund that was commingled with certain other types of funds. And so law states that we need to separate those funds for specifically this type of expenditure as a PEG fund. So we have done that. And so those items will be more transparent to the council for those funds that are available for this purpose.
Okay. I need to apologize to Mr. Kuntz. So Mr. Kuntz, I got distracted and took off. I don't believe you were finished, sir. Please continue.
Thank you, Mayor. So, and this is actually, and I missed the first budget meeting. This is the first I've heard of this PEG fund, PEG, PEG fund. Could you explain a little bit about that?
Yes, sir. The first time you had it, because we just created the fund this year, basically because it was embedded in a fund called grants and donations, and it's not a grant and it's not a donation. So in the essence of trying to be transparent for citizens as well as council and staff, I've segregated out those funds specifically because that is what we're supposed to do. So we have segregated those out into a separate fund. So you will see those in your budget for 23. And anything that's happening in 22, we're currently setting it up right now. But no, you have not seen those funds because they have that fund was just created this year.
you explain what it is, ma'am?
I'm trying to remember what the G stands for. That's why they call it, this is just a shortened version of public equipment for broadcasting. It's a fund that, it comes to us from the franchise fees that we get from the cable companies, and they segregate it out just for the purpose for cities and municipalities to be able to, and school districts to be able to upgrade and for capital investment into their broadcasting systems. And so it's separated out just for that purpose. We actually get 2 stipends from the franchise fees for that, okay?
Okay, Mr.
Did that make it clear, Mr. Council Member Kuntz?
Yes, it did. Well, kind of. Like I said, this is the first I've heard of that, and we didn't create this fund for this particular purchase, right?
No,
okay.
we did not create it for this. This is something that we created in order to be more transparent about what the funds are actually for, and also to be in accordance with the law regarding these funds, what the purpose of them is for. Is what we call a special revenue.
We're separating them.
We are separating the funds, yes.
So it's identified, it comes in a lump sum from your cable franchise fee, and it's within there, but a certain portion of it is identified as a PEG fund. A lot of cities may miss it because you have to look at the details when you're receiving those franchise fees from like AT&T, but it's how many cities run their cable television and other items. And unfortunately, ours was listed as a grant, which it could be considered a grant, but technically it is a special fund dedicated for that public engagement portion.
So everyone that receives cable, there's a fee. This fee is actually embedded in your cable when you getting cable each month. So this is just the cable companies giving us a portion of that back because of their us allowing them to operate in our city.
Mr. Kuntz, did you have anything else?
Yes.
So that's what the P stands for.
Okay, we had some conflicting audio there for a second. Mr. Kuntz, did you have anything else, sir?
Yes, sir. So, just speaking for myself, just hearing about this particular this BEG fund, I'd be kind of interested in looking at. I didn't know this exists, and now that it's being described to me, I'm wondering if there are other places that could be used. But Mayor, I'll have some other comments, and I'll let some other council members speak. Thank you.
Okay, Mr. Harvey.
Thank you, Mayor. This revenue stream is not unusual to Duncanville. Cities throughout the Metroplex receive these monies as part of a quarterly franchise fee that is remitted to them. And according to the enabling legislation, the law passed by the state, this money, these revenue streams can only be used for capital improvements to assist the government in broadcasting its business and its operations to the public. So the prudent way to account for it, because it is restricted, is to put it into a separate fund by itself. And so it's very seldom that opportunities come forward to do capital improvements in broadcasting. So this is just one of those unique opportunities, and here we are.
So piggybacking on Mr. Kuntz's concern, I'm going to try and articulate what I'm hearing, maybe to simplify it, taking out of the accounting ease vernacular, if I may. Basically, what you're saying is we created a line item in our operating statement. The reason being because we wanted to be able to specify individual dollars why they're particular there instead of being aggregated under an umbrella account in the past. So the creation of the account is different in terms of saying we created a fund. Because I understand it's a line item. But we're funding that line item with monies that we already have, that you're saying were aggregated under some other account.
We are actually establishing a separate fund. And when
how
I say
does it get us,
fund,
then what's the revenue stream that
the
puts
revenue
money
stream
into the fund?
is the actual funds that come from the cable company in the form of a franchise fee. That's
But we're already accounting for franchise fees. That's what I'm saying. This money is already coming into the city
Mayor,
in some form.
Could I speak to this?
Go ahead, please.
So what happens is, maybe I didn't say it clearly, is we receive, and I use AT&T as a cable network as an example. There is a section on there that says PEG fund that is specifically to be used for your cable or for basically broadcasting your city business. What we have done is that we have never identified it as a separate line item. And the issue is, if you looked at it carefully and audited, they're going to say, did you spend that money that was collected for that specific use for that use? And the best way in the future to ensure that is to make sure you segregate it from the total franchise fee, which can be used for anything, and make it into a separate fund so that we're annually accounting for that under our franchise fee or under that fund. Because as we had to pull it out and make sure that it was enough money there, we know how much has come from the PEG funds, but just as Mr. Coontz did not notice it was there, it has always been there. It just wasn't spelled out clearly for council and the public to see it. So that's why they're creating a separate fund to ensure that it's used for its purpose that's defined by the law.
And what I'm taking back to is personal experience when you're filling out an operating statement for the IRS. Used to be, if you had rental properties, somebody would say repair and maintenance is grouped under one lump sum. IRS doesn't want to see it broken out anymore. But in the past, they used to be able to say repair and maintenance. So I'm making the analogy that what we used to have was one fund was repair and maintenance, and now we have repair and maintenance as individual line items. So it's the revenue stream funding this particular line item. I understand it's franchise fees. But what you're saying is those franchise fees are being very specifically identified for particular projects. They're going to be operating under the PEG line item.
Yes.
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 Thank you.
Simply, yes.
I got it. I understand
okay.
it, I think.
And
So-
I was just trying to separate out, you were using line items account, and I didn't want you to get the picture that is just a line item. We have set a whole fund, much like the general fund, where I segregate out the revenues, which is the income, which is the PEG franchise fee coming into the fund, and the expenditures of that revenue stream going out of the fund, so that you can clearly see what the expenses are for and the income coming into a separate fund.
Got it. Okay. Mr. Contreras.
So at the onset, you mentioned currently in that account there's $81,000.
Approximately, yes.
Okay, and that's not going to change significantly between now and whenever.
Each quarter, we get an additional amount of income. Franchise fees come in quarterly.
Okay.
So every quarter, we will get an amount for that fund. So it's $80,000 and growing at this point.
Okay, so we can expect on this 5-year proposed contract that you'll be looking somewhere else within our budget to cover that other $100,000 or so.
If you remember, the $100,000 is over a 5-year period.
Right.
So.
But it looks like the contract total value is the last sentence here. So am I assuming something I shouldn't be? That are we trying to get a 5-year contract?
Yes, and with the options to renew. Basically, we have a 3-year with 2 options to renew. So yes, the total value of the contract will be over 180-some thousand.
But
that's spread out over 5
but
years.
Mr. Contreras has a good question. I don't think you got the right answer. At least I understood your question to be, are we guaranteeing a 5-year contract? And you said yes, and the answer to that is no.
No,
The two
I'm not
renewals are
guaranteeing-
in the dollar
guarantee, I'm
value
sorry.
of the contract, but are not going to be exercised until such time as this council decides to do so.
Absolutely. We have the options to renew, and that will be visited each year upon our budget cycle, or whether we extend the option to renew each year.
All right, thank you.
Okay.
So this particular contract, once it's signed, if we approve it tonight, is executed in deficit. Because right now, we have $81,000, but we don't have $132,000 sitting in the bank to fund this contract immediately upon signature.
Right, we do have the annual amount take us through this year.
You do.
And that's what we have appropriated. We will amend the budget for this year for the amount.
I hate to do this, but I got to go back then. If that money is available as a debt that we owe on a contract we sign, a binding agreement with a firm, and we only have $81,000 in that fund, then this contract can't be executed until such funds are distributed or transferred to some other fund to bring this peg up to $832,000.
Well, the contract, and we do this in business all the time, I guess the attorney can speak to this.
Yeah, Mayor, the amount that's paid, I can only fund through this fiscal year.
Yes.
So unless you budget the money for it, then the contract would be canceled because the state constitution requires us. We can't deficit spend. So what the city finance director is telling you, that for the first fiscal year, we have the money to pay for the first year's amount. If we fail to budget additional funds in the future, then we'll have a cancellation clause in the contract because it's constitutionally required. So if the council is of the mind they don't want to fund this anymore from PEG or from any other source, then we'll be obligated to give them notice that the money has not been budgeted for the next fiscal year and the contract's concluded.
Yeah, the essence of my question is, I know that we can't operate in a deficit mode. That's why I'm saying, like, we can't write the check till we have the money in the account.
Yeah, but
and that's
it's not
basic.
due.
That's the
whole
simplistic
amount's
view of
not-
this. Okay.
The whole amount's not due until the next year. It's just over. What they're really telling you is over 3 years you have to pay $132,000.
Right.
If you go to the 2 option years, there will be an additional $51,600 for those 2 years.
So when does the first check get issued to Swagit?
Probably upon execution of the agreement.
Well, there it is.
Year,
That
not
upon
3 years.
execution of the contract, the check's going to be cut.
Yep.
Is that check going to be $132,000?
No. So when we install all the new equipment and everything is working, we bill for the hardware, okay? All the installation, the hardware, which is around, I believe, that $53,000. Teo negotiated a couple of free months of service. So you get a few months of free service. Then starting October 1, new fiscal year, we provide services for the month of October. At the end of that month, that's when you get your invoice for the services of October. If you want to pay annually, you can. If you want to pay monthly, you can pay monthly. But it'd be at the end of the month of the first month of services rendered.
Thank you for the clarification.
Absolutely.
So we're not having to cut a check every quarter. It's a monthly payment as a subscription service. Okay, Mr. Harvey, sir. Oh. I'm sorry. Oh, Mr. Harvey and then Ms. City Manager. Yes.
Okay, so I would have to agree because I'm thinking about the entire 5-year period. And so, yes, we will be funding it from year to year. And so at some point over the 5-year period, unless we are dissatisfied and disassociate and dissolve the relationship, there's going to have to be another place where we look to fund this particular contract. And I am not sure, from what I know about PEG funds, if it's going to be very likely that funds will generate over a 5-year period the amount of money that we're committing to this contract. So at some point in the future, maybe even under a different mayor and council, they're going to have to figure out, where that money is going to come from. So that ends my comment.
Thank you. City Manager.
So Mayor and Council, I think some things that we did not mention in this process. Currently, we have a staff that we pay overtime to be here to do this process. And we found that to be slightly problematic because you're paying overtime. So if you think of the fact that you're going to have someone remotely operating this, that also cuts out and creates a cost savings. The other part on this is that the PEG funds are for that. And so what we would say is what the annual amount is for those PEG funds as far as the budgeting item. The final part of this is that there is an existing system that we've invested a large amount of money in that basically we're continuing to invest in. And so as we start to do it, we're basically selecting a proven technology versus continuing to invest in fixing a car that's not going to ever run. And so although you're seeing this number in this fashion, there are a number of little fixes that have been happening through IT on a system that just is not going to work. And so what we're looking at is a new software application, just as others. We will have to budget annually. Hopefully our cost savings will come from both staff savings. Some of it would be covered by PEG funds, but what we would do, if this is a platform in which council is interested in, is we would annually budget for this. And in our new budget that we'll be presenting, this would be a line item that will be partially funded by PEG, but partially funded by general fund.
Okay, thank you. I see Mr. Kuntz, you have another follow-on. Go ahead, sir.
Yes, sir. Thank you, Mayor. So I want to go back to some of the reasons why, and I've got one or two questions here. So can we get back up to some of the specific reasons, some of the specific problems we have with our current system? The city manager just used the illustration of fixing a car that will never run. I'm currently connected, and I know a lot of problems that we have are on the user end. So I had a problem tonight, but that was my fault. But to me, generally, we have a system that seems to be working. There's an occasional problem, but it doesn't seem like there are ongoing, continual problems where we don't have connectivity, where that there isn't a clear vote from council. And so I guess could someone speak to the specific problems that we're seeing that seem like they can't be remedied?
I can speak to it, Mayor. One big problem we have is we're staff-centered. And so we're dependent on having a person who is running a control room. And that is not a specialty of our team. And so they figured it out. Now, our other option is we can hire someone on an annual basis who just manages this process versus trying to teach someone to manage the production portion of it, which is what their team does. And so basically we're outsourcing that function of production costs. So that has been a bit of our challenge. The other issue you have in this is that if you are not on Facebook and if you are not on YouTube, which some people aren't, you don't have the ability to see this if you are not into those technologies. But one of the things and the advantages of this is that I can now go to my website, and if they have an example of it to show you, and I can see on the city website your council meeting. You also have the ability to broadcast it to your cable network. Now, on your city's website, you're also creating an opportunity where someone's looking for an agenda item. If you look on YouTube, you kind of move through slowly but surely. What you will see is an indexed list of all the council agenda items, and you can go to that specific item and actually pull it up. And so we're fixing something that is not the most cost-effective from a staff utilization, but also creating a better access to information for our citizens so that it'll be easier for them to see and to follow along with it. And that's what the PEG funds are made for. And we'd love to demonstrate it for you if you'd like to see it. I think they may have something to show you.
Thanks, City Manager. And just kind of follow up. So I guess, you know, I'm kind of thinking in terms of, so you have a house and you've got bad plumbing, you got to fix the plumbing, you got something's wrong with the AC, and you've got some floorboards need to be replaced. And so the city of Duncanville is kind of in a situation where we're looking at all these different problems that we have. We have, and Mayor, feel free to stop me if I go off topic, but we're talking about implementing, you know, putting in a new system, and we haven't been having a lot of success lately with implementing new systems. We've got some new systems that you know, we're currently dealing with a lot of problems right now with the new systems. And again, my feeling is that what we have is working. And just to completely replace it and to spend the money just to completely replace it, I'm just not entirely sure about that. And I also have an issue with, the more I've heard about the funding component, the more concerns I have. So those are my statements, and I'll be voting against this. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Coons. Mr. Contreras.
How old is the equipment that we're talking about here?
It's multiple ages, so that's where we are. But to answer the question, this is what the problem is, and you'll have an update from IT coming soon in July.
Okay.
None of our systems are completely implemented, and we hired, as I said before, digital resources, and they brought in a system. It's called Creston. Creston is a proprietary system with proprietary programming languages that we don't master. It's not something that we in IT master. We're not AV, we're information technology. So what we found is that new system that we put in, and we paid some $20,000 for that, it is not working properly. So what you see right now is where we come in hours early and we practice and we prepare to make sure it works. Sometimes it works great and sometimes it does not. I can tell you there's a lot of technology in here that we put in and it doesn't all work together. And I have to be, I'll just be frank. I can tell you right now that this podium is full of technology, but it does not accommodate this laptop. This laptop doesn't belong. If you go into the briefing room where we've replaced the monitors, we have technology behind that, but it doesn't always work, so you always see us bring a laptop in. So can it work? It can, but as Councilman Coons has already eloquently said, we have a lot of technology that we have not fully implemented, and this is yet just one more thing that's not fully implemented. And I think that we have a responsibility to the council and our citizens to be able to give them the experience that they need to participate, and we cannot get this fixed timely. So we come over, I would say, since I've been here my 3 months, this has consumed my energy, and I'm not a audiovisual TV person by any means. So it's a very consuming type situation, and we can continue to bring different vendors in, but we have not had the stability to have one vendor come in and get us from where we are to where we need to be, which is why we recommended Swagit.
So what I think I heard you say was that with the new system that we have in place right now, we invested $20,000 or so into the audiovisual. What's going to happen to that $20,000 investment if we go to this system?
It will stay.
Could you step to the mic, please?
Excuse me. The system will stay, so the Crestron, your microphones, all that stuff will stay. The difference is that we're going to come in, we're going to configure it correctly, get everything running appropriately and working correctly. And so we have staff that deals with this stuff, every day. Like, this is what our bread and butter is. So that's something that we intend to do. And being 30 minutes away, we can be here fast, if for some reason something changes. But ideally, that's the plan, is to.
Okay. So I'm going to go back and last question, Mayor. So hearing all of this, part of the problem is still that we have some systems in there that are different ages, some of them technologically way out of date. Is that correct?
Yes, but they're going to use they're going to use what we have that we've invested, the 20,000 piece, and they're going to integrate it so that when they broadcast, and then they're responsible for it and not us. Remember, I said before, they have one programmer. They used to have 3, they have 1, which puts us at a higher risk, but they're taking on that liability to make sure that that Creston system works the way it's supposed to work each and every time. we can't do anything with it. All we can do is call someone. Actually, we panic, I'll just be honest, because the people that were here before are gone. So we've had a turnover, and we're blessed to have the person that's in the room right now because he has some tenure here. But of the IT staff, 3 of us are under a year. So that even makes it even more cumbersome for us.
But to be clear, this isn't that the new people don't understand our old system. The old system is just not functioning properly.
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. McBurdette, sir.
Thank you, Mayor. One thing, I mean, we have this contract, but you mentioned coming out, and if you're on call with Swagit, is there additional costs that go along with that as well?
So the plan is to get it working correctly the first time. That's the goal, right? Everything should be working so that we don't have to come back on site. The Yellowknife Canada example, it took us 10 hours by plane, 3 plane rides. There's no way we can get up there, quickly. So the idea is to build everything correctly the first time. Now, to answer your question, if we do need to come on site, we'll come on site. If it's something that needs to be replaced, then yes, obviously that would, be out of pocket for you guys. But as far as being able to troubleshoot it, no, we'll come out and do a service, call on the product. But 99% of the time, it can be done remotely with our system.
When any system is installed IT-wise, my experience is that system runs in a background server before it goes live. What's the process with y'all?
So in terms of meeting, is that what you're speaking to?
No, I'm talking about creating this entire system, implementing it, but it's implemented in a back office server, so it's not live. It's running soft. Folks that need access to it can get to it, but the citizens don't see it. It's not on our website until it's proven that it's bug-free, and then it opens up on our site.
Absolutely, yes. In fact, what I had recommended is that we do a couple mock meetings. So before it's even, a main council meeting or an official meeting, that we just do some mock meetings and do some trial runs with bringing in different elements, the hybrid of Zoom, and then also a phone call, into the room, things like that can cause some interference to make sure that there isn't any.
Okay, and that's my concern, is that we don't implement and produce a system that evidences to our citizenry that doesn't work, that we haven't figured out first, this thing is going to operate.
Absolutely.
Okay. One comment about Mr. Kerner.
Yeah, I have one more question.
Let me make one more
comment.
Thank
you.
I brought up the issue of the monies. Mr. Coons brought up the issue where this fund come from, and I brought up the issue of funding the contract itself. I will conclude my thoughts and comments this way, that I personally, not speaking for the council, I have implicit trust in our finance department to ensure that this fund is adequately funded and the checks that are cut are operating in strict compliance with GAAP in terms of anything necessary, that we will not ever operate in a deficit mode. With that assurance, I'm comfortable with what goes on in our finance department. Mr. Contreras.
Yes, last question, promise. Does this system have the availability of closed caption for hearing impaired?
Yes, it does. The encoder that is sold with the system is a caption-friendly encoder. There is additional software that needs to be added and a small little encoder decoder, but outside of that, yes, it is captioning friendly.
Okay, so is that within the contract that we have negotiated? No. It's not?
Not at this time, sir.
Okay, so I would suggest that however we make this motion, that we include the potential for us to add, I think it's just, it would appear to me it's as valuable to the hearing impaired as going bilingual. So I would ask that however we make the motion, that we include that potential.
I would agree, well, not the potential. I mean, I think we ought to just add it as a form of this resolution that we pass, that this contract be amended to include closed captioning. And also, at some point in the future, the potential for simultaneous broadcast in a second language, which may also include closed captioning in a second language. Okay. Chair will entertain a motion to approve under those
Mayor?
conditions that we have just enumerated.
I'd like to ask one more comment.
Oh, sure.
Again, it goes back to cost. What's that going to cost us?
So the software is a one-time of $6,800. The encoder decoder is $4,995. So just over 10,000, or yeah, about 11,000. And then on top of that, the captioning is $50 per event hour for the English captions. We do have something else that I would like to mention, though. It's a product called Sound Search, and it's $250 a month, but no additional hardware or software. And it provides you with a transcript of the entire meeting. It is actually technically considered captions because it's to the right of the video, and the text will bold, and you can click anywhere in that transcript, and the video will jump directly to that point. So it is a fantastic feature because it's not based on hours or minutes. It's just a flat rate fee. So it is a very cost-effective option, and I think a very good option to offer.
Is that function, does it work with a live feed?
It's on demand only, but it is 3 to 4 hours once the meeting has been timestamped and published. It shows up right next to the video.
And the cost again was $250 what?
$250 a month.
A month.
Mm-hmm. Flat rate. So it's...
going back to your comment, Mr. Contreras, to me, being able to provide closed captioning on something that we do for the public almost comes under the ADA, Americans with Disability Act. If there are individuals out there in our citizenry that need to be having closed captioning, I don't think we can ignore that need.
Yeah.
And so, yes, it's another budget item. It's something else we need to augment in terms of this resolution as we go forward. Mr. Teo, City Manager, I know you're right there, City Manager. So
City Attorney Hager has his hand up.
I'm sorry? Mr. Hager, yes, sir.
Yeah, if we could get a total price for the captioning, Mayor, so we can add it to the contract, so I can add it to the resolution. And we could add that amount in the motion.
So would you prefer to do that versus the Sound Search option? That's more cost-effective option. So there's two solutions. There's the closed captioning, which is the $6,800 and the $4,995, plus the $50 per event hour. Or there's Sound Search, which has no additional upfront, and it's $250 extra a month, but it's unlimited, not based on hours or minutes. And it's not real time, but it's after the fact, shortly thereafter the meeting. So it's a very fast
closed
turnaround.
captioning is not real time under that?
The first one is. The one where we have to add additional hardware and software, that is real time. That's how we get the real time, is adding that additional hardware and software.
But after that, closed captioning is only available when viewing it as a recording, not real time.
The Sound Search option, yeah, that's a separate feature. Does that make sense?
Mayor, I agree with your first response. I think we need to be fair to those individuals, that we need to give them the opportunity to hear a live feed.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think we're doing a disservice to those individuals that need simultaneous closed captioning.
Yep.
And it's a cost that I think the city has to bear.
Fair enough.
So these are good questions. So, Mr. Hager, I think we have augmented this particular resolution to some degree.
You have, it's about, the way I calculated, about $12,000 added to the 3-year total.
Is it sufficient for me to call for a motion on this particular resolution with the stipulated conditions that we have stated here? Number one, that it be closed captioned in the most effective manner for real time, and that there would be the potential.
An additional amount not to exceed $12,000.
Okay.
Mayor, the city manager has her hand up.
Oh, I'm sorry. Who? Yes. Ms. Aretha, go ahead.
So a couple of things I think would be an easy thing for us to do is, in cities I've been in, we've had actually someone doing signing because it was required. And so we know that's a priority for council. And the other option would work for the long term, but for the short term, having someone who is doing sign language. And so if you would put that in that, but give us the opportunity to work with our city secretary to see what would be the cost associated with having someone live. A lot of councils will have that person right there on site. For example, if you had a citizen who was on site and they weren't watching online, they would have someone who's translating. And I think that would be more ADA responsible too. So if you give us the chance to come back, but tell us that that is a priority for you, we can come back with that additional cost, but we not to exceed the amount and how we can do it best.
Not to delay this particular action, so the augmentation that we're asking for is roughly $12,000, which brings the first 3-year contract to $144,064. Would that be a fair statement? Do we agree with that in terms of resolution? And then our procurement agent, Mr. Tail, would then recalculate those 2 additional options that we have for the 5 years if we choose to exercise those renewal options. So that's the essence of the motion that we have. Is there a motion to be made, sir?
Mayor, it looks like they want more to say.
Yeah,
So,
excuse me, sorry. So the one-time upfront additional of the 12,000 is correct, but then for the services, it's $50 per event hour. So I just want to make sure that
We understand that.
Okay.
We understand, but as we've discussed, the simultaneous presence of that closed captioning is vital to our citizens. And that's why with that necessity comes cost. We do understand that. And I'm sure at some point our procurement agent can negotiate that fee.
We'll just have to shorten our meetings.
Mayor?
I'm sorry.
Mayor, I don't know how time critical this is, but with those understandings, why don't we bring you back the correct amount with the correct calculations instead of us guessing, only to have to come back to you again.
Based on advice from our city attorney, I think it's fair that all of these wrinkles be worked out and come on back to us, and we'll get it right going out of the house. Excellent. Thank you very much. Appreciate it. And as you know, when we have folks like you that come before the city council, what I've often said is that we do not apologize for the interrogation. That's just our job.
I appreciate the due diligence. Thank you, everybody. Thank you, Mayor Council.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Hager, for that advice. So this one's going to be coming back to us. All right, that moves us on to item number 5 for presentations. And this is Chief Innovation Officer Jennifer Odie and Director Atmore as necessary as they tag team this. I will advise our citizenry watching this and present tonight, this is the initial, what should we say, the initial move on the budget process that this council eventually has to approve by September of this year in order to be legal with the state of Texas.
Yeah, Mayor and Council,
Mayor, yeah.
in keeping with your ever-present vigilance regarding your budget, I don't believe my services are no longer needed and ask that I be relieved for this evening.
We happily agree that we don't want to pay you any more by the hour, Mr. Hager.
That's right. Mayor, I did
Good
have
evening,
a,
sir. Thank you.
I
Yeah,
do have
Mr.
a
McBurnett.
question and stuff. Do we need to make a motion on this to table it?
No, we'll bring it back.
Okay.
If we'll bring it back at your next regular meeting.
So the minutes will just reflect that there was no decision to be made tonight. It'll come back at a later date. Okay.
Yep.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good night, Mr. Hager.
Good night, Council. Good luck.
Okay. So our initial foray into the budget season begins tonight. Welcome. For our citizens that are present, this gets a little deep and it gets a little heavy at times, but that's what's necessary for us to bring forth a budget that we all understand, both we and the citizens understand its final outcome. So, a discussion on the fiscal year 22-23 potential budget outlook. Continue, please.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. I have Ms. Adina Outmore, the Managing Director of Fiscal Services, as well as our City Manager, Aretha Farrell-Benavides. This will be a tag team effort this evening. And as you said, Mayor, that this is the potential budget outlook. This is by no means a final product. This is the opportunity for us to present to you kind of a baseline where we are at this point in time. And this will give you all the opportunity to have the input. Give the opportunity for the citizens to contact us and to contact y'all of like what they needs to be included into the budget for this upcoming fiscal year. So to kick it off, just wanted to review the calendar. Now, at a previous council meeting, we did discuss your calendar for the budget calendar and planning process, but just as a reminder, we should have the appraised certified rolls come from the Dallas Central Appraisal District on July 1st, which is much earlier than it has been in the past, so that'll be good. Give us more time to work through the revenues. We have a water wastewater rate study presentation coming to you in the middle of July. On a side note to that, we will not be talking about the utility fund this evening as a part of our presentation, as we will reserve that for when we have the water wastewater rate study. We will be filing the budget with the city secretary on Friday, July 29th. So all of this will be wrapped up within the month, and then it'll be turned over to you as it'll be now the council's budget at that point in time. We'll be working through the rate calculations from the county. That usually comes in the first week in August. So that's we have to work with the county and with the Central Appraisal District as we have to calculate what those tax rates are going to be and what you as the council are going to approve and what we ultimately turn over to the citizens. We'll be having a public town hall on the proposed budget in August, as well as we'll have a public hearing on the budget and tax rate later in the month, and we hope to have everything finalized and adopted by the end of August. So that is our tight timeline for the next couple of months for our budget. Ms. Aretha, Ms. Farrell-Benavides, do you want to? Yes.
Yes. So Mayor and Council, part of our process has been working with Council to identify the strategic pillars, which was adopted earlier this year. And as we look at our pillars, we start to look at our budget. And our strategic pillars, as we've identified and voted and adopted, are reimagine high quality of life, emphasize government accountability, customer service efficiency, process improvement, promote innovative ideas and development and redevelopment, develop infrastructure improvement and strategy, and advance marketing strategies for city and community engagement plan. Next slide. So as we look at this, we're looking at our budget in sense of here are our goals. And so when we looked and asked individuals in our staff to identify, we want to know which of these buckets does it fall into. And going a little bit farther where we said to develop and maintain and encourage safe, attractive, viable, family-oriented neighborhoods that embrace diversity, pride, promoting economic vitality. The other is develop a high-performing organization that encourages innovative transparency and collaboration while delivering exceptional customer service. Pursue a diverse and robust economy through various businesses, housing, and employment opportunities that encourage forward-thinking community and economic development. Ensure the viability and adaptability of our city's infrastructure, facilities, and transportation network through thoughtful financial and long-term planning. And then the last is to strengthen communication and engagement within the community while championing the city of Duncanville regionally, nationally, and internationally. And so as we talk about those goals, what you will see when we start to talk about our budget activities and priorities, we are looking for things that support those pillars in which Council has identified. Next slide. So as we looked at objectives of the budget, we listened to Council. We also had a pre-budget workshop. We also did a survey, which we'll talk a little bit about. And so as we looked at where we were from items that we were trying to budget for and starting to budget for in this process, as you see in the middle, attract and retain high quality talent. Each of those pillars are supported by our ability to attract and retain our staff and our employees. As you've known and we've mentioned, is that we have had trouble, as many cities have, in retaining. With the Great Resignation, we see numerous people just leaving the workplace, and we're having a hard time getting people in. So we're doing several activities to include a compensation study and others that we'll talk about more. What are the objectives that we're looking for and priorities that we've identified? Completion of capital projects. We know that there are bond projects that we need to finish. They've been underworked for a while. Many of them are not funded at the level in which we need to complete them, and so that is one of our priority areas. The other is develop community safety programs. We realize that safety goes from public safety to fire and EMS, but also to internal security and looking, for example, at our neighborhoods, what things we can do to enhance the safety in our neighborhoods beyond just patrol of officers, but into community safety programs. Some people have ring programs and things like that. Enhanced community programs. We've heard a call that we look toward what more can we do. We'll talk about our special events and things like that, but what other programs are out there, both in our in our library, our PIP program, how can we help and add to those things that help to enhance our community's activities? Revitalization of our neighborhood. Through economic development, we're looking at areas where we can reinvest in some of our neighborhoods. We are a community that is well developed, but we also want to focus on how do we help those neighborhoods to make some changes. We looked at monument signs and internal improvements and things like that. Customer service, customer service, customer service. Every year we talk about it. We want to put our money where our mouth is and looking at funding, fully funding our customer service program. And so that will be something that we've made a priority. That's one thing is looking at the phone tree, but also making sure there's someone to answer the phones. And so we are working on rolling out our customer service program. Ms. Kristen is the lead in helping with this program. And we will look forward to giving you a presentation on what that program would look like. And last but certainly not least is to expand development and redevelopment opportunities. We need to look at our shopping centers and making sure that as we've done with Wheatland Plaza, we're focusing on those other shopping centers to ensure that we're getting the businesses that our residents and council want, but also that we're retaining those businesses and providing them opportunities to grow and to thrive in our community. Next slide. All right, I'm going to turn this over to Ms. Atmore and her team.
Yes, Council, as we take a look at our revenues for the general fund, as we start to look at the budget, we start to take a look at, you know, the major sources of funding that we have for the city. And so this year, when we're looking at the 2023 budget year, we took a look at where we are. You can see what we adopted in 22, the budget, the revenues, and you can see what we're proposing. When we take a look at the property tax revenues, when we looked at what we already have today, you'll take a look at another slide. I'll show you what the preliminary assessed value came in as the last preliminary before we actually get the certified. In that process and looking at the revenue, the property taxes, we realized that we had a huge new construction to come online. So that will actually increase our assessed value for the upcoming year. So as we wait for the final certified property values, we look now to is in excess of about 14 to 20% of what we actually landed on the value from last year. Sales tax. Sales tax is progressing pretty well. Basically, we've been conservative in the past, and what we did this year, we worked with economic development, taking a look at what's out there, what is coming into the city, what new retail is coming online, as well as what the economy is doing and what we're seeing. And we're seeing an increase. And so this year we started to look at, let's be a little bit more realistic. And so when we looked at the sales tax, we did plug in an increase. So you will see that make a significant jump for this for 23 fiscal year. Permits and licensing, there's a little bit of a slump right now. We did do, if you see in 21, we actually had 1.6 million. We went down in 22, went slightly up, but our permits are not exactly where they were in prior years. And some of that has to do with, we're expecting health permits at this time will probably come in around September. As we talk to the Planning and Neighborhood Services Director, we'll probably see an increase in that. So we should get our budgeted amount, but right now it's not going to be where it was in prior year. So those are the kind of the major sources of revenue when you take a look from the general fund. So there's basically for 23, we're projecting about a 7.2% increase in revenues for the general fund.
Now, question, the marked increase on line 54 for from 165 to 237? Yeah, where's that coming?
Intergovernmentals is grants, and most of these are from funding or reimbursements that we're receiving between, whether it be the cities that we are reimbursing monies to. DISD would be one of them, Duncanville Independent School District, where they reimburse us for certain services that we're providing. So that's where that line item comes in, as well as there are certain grants that we get that maybe reimburse some of the personnel costs, maybe of the police or fire, and that's where that number comes in at. And so that's kind of, it depends year to year or what that amount could be. So we kind of look to the departments, especially our public safety or other what reimbursements we have out there we're looking to do, and with those will maintain the following year. We may get an update from our neighboring cities about what our reimbursements needs to be.
Okay, thank you.
This is just giving you a pie chart of what percentage of the certain categories of revenues are. 55% of our revenues from general fund come from property taxes, because we are a bedroom community. That's where the bulk of our revenues come. Right behind it is sales tax at 26%. And so we're looking to enhance that as we work with economic development to see how we can kind of take some of the load off of property tax so that we can get more development or redevelopment into our community. Let's take a look at the property tax history for the city of Duncanville. As you can see, Mayor, I know you've said that the tax rate for the city has consistently gone down, and so last year we had a tax rate of 0.70 for the city. And so as we started to take a look, I have done a preliminary look at calculating the property tax rate, just taking into consideration the preliminary assessed value. And I had to bear in mind that there are some numbers that have not come in yet, so I cannot do an accurate assessment of where our tax rate or our no new revenue tax rate will land at this point. But preliminary, we took a stab at it, that we might be looking at a tax rate of a 0.68. So that might be lending another decrease in the tax rate for Duncanville, because basically we do have an increase in assessed value, so that can take some of the burden off. So this is just a stab at it. You can see down below that we do have, that is the preliminary assessed value from DCAD, of $3.4 billion in property tax, and that includes the new construction that came online. And so this is a significant increase.
If it turns out to be the city's request that this council consider a tax rate of 0.689210, that being identical to the voter approval rate, that means we have to go to the citizens.
Yeah, at 0.689, but that's just the that's just the rate that we are projecting at this point. But I can tell you that we won't come back to you with that recommended rate that will put at the voter approval rate, but that was just for illustration to kind of show you where that is. So we will land on it, just as we did last year. The voter approval rate was 0.702073.
Right.
And we came back and proposed a rate of 0.70.
Right. Well,
Okay.
that's why I asked the question,
Yes,
because
sir.
seeing that voter approval rate identical to what's being proposed, as long as
As
that
we
can
said,
be,
this is an
that can be
estimate.
avoided, that needs to be avoided.
This is an estimate, and that rate will give you a sizable amount of revenue for the general fund from prior years.
Okay.
This is to get a.
Mr. Coates has his hand up.
Mr. Kuntz, yes, I'm sorry.
Mayor?
Yes, Mr. Kuntz. Yeah, I need help following this. Yes, please. Go ahead, Mr. Kuntz.
Yes, sir. Thank you, Mayor. As we go through this process, could we go back to the previous slide, please? As we go through this process, would we be able to see the actual impact in terms of dollars when we start to see different options for what kind of tax rate we might consider? So, for example, the difference between 0.689 and 0.7. And seeing the actual impact in terms of dollar to each household, or just the average household, and then seeing the impact in terms of dollars when it comes to lost or gained revenue by the entire city. Does that make sense?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. I will show you in another later slide where we do calculate what the family rate value of home is for single family for this year that DCAD calculated for us, as well as what 1 cent on the tax rate will cost us, looking at the preliminary value. Now, bear in mind, this is not the certified value. This is just taxable value that we have. So we're just making estimates off of this. But yes, we will, when we budget to you, we will present those options. You'll have an opportunity to look at the tax rate and vote on whether you adopt that rate or not.
Okay, and I just want to be clear what I'm asking, so that the average property owner, they can say, okay, exactly how much of a difference would I be paying, in terms of dollars, if the tax rate were this much lower or this much higher, and then for us as a council to be able to see exactly how much in terms of dollars, again, one tax rate would bring in revenue compared to one that's lower or higher.
Yes, sir. We will be happy to bring that to you. That is be part of our budget presentation to you, that we have you look at those and look at what that costs, what a penny on the 1 penny on the tax rate will do, and so that you can see those options and what the impact to a homeowner will cost per year.
And what we can do, Mr. Koontz, is we have a spreadsheet. I mean, we won't be able to go individual, but we have them in categories as we look at it and show you the average homeowner, how much would that cost within a range. And so we'll have that spreadsheet based on your request and as part of our presentation.
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
So this is just a comparison of the tax rates of the other cities within the best Southwest, so you can see kind of where we land. If you look at the top line, the blue line is that is the rate for Lancaster. As you can see, they have one of the highest property tax rate. Next to that is the city of Dallas, right underneath them, and then we have Duncanville's rate is right at the line, just a little above DeSoto's at this point, but you can see the tax rate are going down as we get into 22, so tax rates are starting to level off and go down as we see. But we are competitive in the area as far as tax rates are concerned. We are within the ballpark. This is the average city taxes that are paid per year. Each year this changes. As DCAD does the values, the taxable, assesses the properties and do appraisals. And you can see there's a chart with all the history of the average taxable values per year on the average tax at a home for home value. So this year at 21 is $173,000 for taxable value. I won't say this year, is tax year 21, which is for fiscal year 22. And then, so the average city taxes a homeowner with a home with that value would pay $1,200, $1,216, and that monthly cost at about $101.33. And so, as we go through the 22 tax year 22, when we get those numbers from DCAD and Dallas County, we will provide that year's numbers for the council. I'll have Miss Farrah Benavides talk about the homestead exemptions that I think council has asked about. Okay.
So, Mayor and Council, often we have a discussion about homestead exemptions, and we've talked about how many, and we were working around through the numbers and wanted to talk about the types of exemptions that are available to the city portion of the taxes. As she mentioned earlier, the 1,200 is the city portion. There's still the county, the school, the Dallas College, and the hospital district. But for our portion of the taxes, one thing that was new effective January 1st, and I think it's 2008, the Texas Property Tax Code section states that residential homestead is limited to a 10% increase. So what you'll see on many of the property tax bills is what's called a homestead cap. And those caps will say that if it increased over that, that's the maximum increased value. We have about 6,982 who are impacted by that. Now, the next area we have is our age 65 and older. That's for individuals who are over the age of 65 or their surviving spouse. as long as they are 55 years of age. Currently, with our 65 and older, we have about 3,198 individuals who are receiving the homestead exemption for 65 and older. The next opportunity they have is the disabled non-veteran. Those are homeowners who are disabled persons exemption. The surviving spouse of the person receiving disability exemption may be entitled to the tax with some living limits if they are over 55 and they remain unmarried. We have about 302 individuals. Now, the first two, 65 and disabled, you can only receive one or the other, not both. And so in some cases, you'll see things where they're combined, but those aren't. And these are our current as of this year, this coming fiscal year. There's another group that's in Texas that you'll see often is a 100% disabled veteran. And so these are individuals who received 100% exemption and disability rating from the federal government through the military. The 100% disabled compensation due to service-connected disability. A rating of 100% disabled of individuals unemployable, or if they are surviving spouse of a disabled veteran who qualified for the 100%. So in this case, these are individuals that are completely exempt from property tax, or real estate property tax. We have 161 individuals who fall in that category. The next level is also a military level, which is a partially disabled veteran. These are homeowners who have a service-connected disability rating. And so what the military does is they have different levels of rating, and many may be familiar with that. And so in those different, it can vary in range based on the level of disability, in many cases between $5,000 and $12,000 deduction. And that is currently we have about 259 of our residents who are receiving that exemption. Now, it's the same for there. You're either 100% if you're a veteran getting disabilities, or you're partial. And the same thing would be said for the 65. And so now the question would be is, if you're a partially disabled veteran, you are also eligible for the 65, as well as the homestead cap if you're paying taxes. So my 161 are not impacted by it, but the other areas are also impacted by the 10% homestead cap. Next slide. So as we've been having this discussion, we have approximately 3,500 homeowners who qualify for the exemption. So what we are proposing and for this budget is that we would increase, very similar to our neighboring cities, to increase our age exemption for those 65 or older and disabled. And that's the same individuals I just mentioned. Individuals 65 or older and disabled, it's their primary residence, it can't be a rental property, and they qualify currently for a $30,000 exemption. Okay, and so now what we're proposing to do is to increase it for seniors and disabled over 2 years with $5,000 per year. DeSoto has already passed their resolution. I spoke with Cedar Hill and Lancaster today, and they're doing similar, and you've probably heard it on the news where others are increasing that exemption. What we would do at this point, because of the timing of it, is that we would have to pass a resolution that would be part of our budget package, forward the resolution to DCAD, and because it would have to be sent to them by March of 2023, and it would be effective for the 2023 fiscal year with the tax bills due on October 1st, 2023. This is a very long process, but we also believe that that number for seniors as an aging community will undoubtedly start to increase, and that this will provide the best benefit to our citizens in giving them ultimately a $40,000 exemption for seniors and those with disabilities. There are questions on that, and I know we'll talk some more about it in the actual budget, and we're looking for feedback on that and more explanations if necessary. Okay?
Okay. So we get back to the general fund tax and taking a look at the sales tax history. As I had said to you earlier, we are on an upward incline on the sales tax. The total sales tax will land in Duncanville for 2023 of about almost $12 million. So that's split between economic development, the general fund portion, as well as the portion as relief for property tax breaks. So that's how our sales tax is broken down.
The legend is missing on this. What are the colors?
That is a good question.
Division of the funds by which portion goes to the city, which portion goes to economic development, and the third portion, Jennifer?
So it's city economic development.
Wait.
I believe
So
the
green
is economic development.
Green is it? Okay.
Yes, green is economic development, which is the same as the blue. in terms of the, you know, the portion, and the blue is the property relief, and the 1%, that's general fund.
Okay.
So sorry about that.
Sorry about that, we left off the legend.
Okay, thank you.
Next, we're going to take a look at the general fund expenditure, what our potential outlook. I just want you to bear in mind that the budget for 2023 on the expenditure side, staff has taken a look, and what they have kind of included as expenditures is looked at the cost of goods has gone up, the cost of supplies. As you know, the supply chain, there's a lot of supply chains issues out there. Fuel has gone up. And so all this budget takes in a lot of consideration of that. There are no supplemental or extra additions included in this first stab at the proposed budget. We just wanted to give you a look at what the expenditure part looks at right now until we go through and talk with staff about the supplemental requests that they have. But right now there's a slight decrease in what we're proposing for 2023 from the adopted budget of 22. So what this does include, though, is we have $170,000 for network hardware replacements on our infrastructure, which in July, our CIO will come back to you and talk to you a little bit more about where we are on our network and IT infrastructure. Mr. City Manager, do you have something?
I think Mr. Koontz has his hand up, Mayor.
I'm sorry, Mr. Koontz. Keep forgetting to look at you.
Me too.
I'm sorry, Mayor.
Mr. Koontz.
Thank you. Could you explain line 108 non-departmental?
Undepartmental?
Yes.
Non-departmental these are our line items where maybe take transfers to other funds, or where we're trying to, they're not really belonging to any department. They may be trying to fund, for an instance, the network infrastructure doesn't necessarily belong to one department. It's network for the whole city. So we may be using that as non-departmental to transfer our funds to the IT replacement fund. Okay.
Also, you sometimes budget your utilities and other things. So things that cover the entire city that aren't specific are sometimes placed in non-departmental. Those things that don't fit into any other category are generally there.
Right.
Yeah, Mr. Harvey has a comment or question.
Where does non-departmental include our contribution to Southwest Regional?
I don't think it's there. I think it really comes out of the police department.
Okay.
Because that's an actual payment we do to Southwest Regional. So I believe it comes out of the police department.
So next time we get together, maybe just verify that.
Yeah, you will get a detail, and we can show you the detailed line items. This is at a higher level just by department, but we will come back and show you a budget that has the details of what those are.
Mayor, it looks like Mr. Koontz still had a question.
Mr. Koontz.
Okay,
Mr. Koontz, I'm sorry.
Let's go back to Mr. Koontz, and then City Manager, yes.
No, she answered my question. Thank you, Mayor.
Okay, City Manager?
So Mayor, what you're going to also see in here is that we've taken new eyes, new look, and Ms. Admore, and the reason some of the questions are a little vague for us right now is that we've noticed, as we talked about even with PEG funds, is that there are some things that were placed in areas because they were placed there. We're now trying to take a holistic look at our budget and make sure things are aligned where they go. And what you'll notice on here is, for example, a new section, neighborhood and planning. And so in Public Works, many of these functions were there, and so they've been separated out. And so the way they've been classified in the past is, for example, general government, for people who may not understand, it has the city manager's office, the city secretary's office, HR, IT, and I'm missing one person, and our PIO.
Mm-hmm.
And so in some organizations, you'll see each of these listed individually. But because they were such small units, we clumped them in. But when you see the budget breakdown, you'll see each department by department. Right now, they're basically listed as divisions. Fiscal services, neighborhood and planning. And so our goal is, because when we built our financial management system, we put them in this, and it's a lot more difficult to break them out. But as you've seen our organizational and our structure moves, it's allowed us a little more. So for example, ultimately in the beginning, library is part of general government services versus park and recreation or leisure services. And so as we're trying to not just clump things into one general bulk, we want to make sure we create transparency and list everything out as much as individual as possible.
Quick question. Looking at incomes versus expenses, revenue versus expenditures, there's only a very, very small delta of $268,000, which is very, very tight.
Yes.
In terms of no wiggle room for anything coming up that we're not prepared for. However, now try to take that in terms of a $268,000 delta between income versus expenses. Where does that $237,000 for IT come into that 268, or does it not?
It's already in that amount. Part of it, if you see the use of fund balance, we tried to separate out in this scenario to you what the use, your okaying uses of fund balance. So there's $170,000 for the network, and there's an additional that's in the use of fund balance for this fiscal year. Okay.
But just recognize, folks, that we are very, very close here. Very close.
Well, we are trying not to spend more than the revenues this year, which we have in the past. We have planned to use fund balance, so we're trying to work it differently this year. So we are doing our best as we talk with departments and come to maybe additional changes. But this is our first stab at it, so we're working hard at trying to make it a balanced budget.
Okay, thank you. Mr. McBurnett.
Yes, sir.
Thank you, Mayor. This might be addressed more towards the city manager, but when I look at the Public Works Department, and I'm going to ask it, do we simply have enough funding in there to do what we're trying to get done? Or is that something that we need to look at in terms of issuing other debt?
Well, the Public Works Department is just the operating side of it. A lot of the projects that you see that we're underfunded by are actually in other funds, capital project funds. So they don't pay for those projects out of the general fund budget. Most of this is just to pay for salaries and operating expenses. You will see other funds where we talk about the capital projects funds that we're not going to talk about tonight. We'll just show you some shortages. You asked for us to come back for that, but those projects are not in the Public Works Department in the general fund. Did that answer your question? Okay.
Just one quick question on those particular line items, that like police and fire, Public Works, those dollar amounts are calculating at full staff?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
Make sure. Okay, thank you.
And like I said, there is no additional staff added to this particular year at this point until we have an opportunity to go talk with the city manager and each department about what they're requesting for the year. This is general fund expenditures broken down by expense category. So you get to see the total salary and benefits, supplies, contractual services. You can see what the salary and benefits are proposed for this year. We are seeing a decrease in the medical insurance, so we did see a 3% decrease in insurance for 2023. We also added a line item in what we are calling final payout. In essence, we moved it to a final payout line item is when people leave the city and they take their vacation, or they're sick, or they retire out and they take a lump sum. We put an item to budget for that. One of that budget is in non-departmental, so that we can monitor that and making sure that that we don't go over, or that we can see basically what we're getting into each year as far as people leaving, the turnover rate, as far as how it affects the city's line items. And then, of course, it includes the one-time fund balance, which it decreased from prior year, because if you remember, we had a one-time fund balance user project of the P25 was about a $2 million project. So there's a decrease in the general fund budget expenditures.
Line 79 going from 370 to 491.
other expenses in finance is just miscellaneous expenses that don't really fit anywhere else. It could be donations, it could be one-time revenues that come into the city. There's a hodgepodge of stuff that comes line item, and that's why we kind of call it miscellaneous other expense. It also can be if there were any financing sources or financing funds, but general fund, usually we don't capture those funds there. But
these are expenditures, not income. You were just talking
I'm
about
sorry,
money's
yes,
coming in. I'm
expenditures
talking,
that
these
we
are
might
expenditures.
yes, for miscellaneous supplies, miscellaneous tools, miscellaneous, just various things that come up. I'm sorry, I was confusing it with revenues. But yeah, this is a line item where things that don't fit into those categories, so they won't have a voluminous of categories for expenditures, we usually place them under expenses or the financing uses.
Okay, thank you.
And so this is just a kind of a breakout of the pie of how all of that breaks out. As you can see, the salary and benefits is about 61% of your expenditure budget. And the next biggest line item is basically your professional contractual and professional services, and that's where we pay for things on contracts, consultants, professionals, and that type of thing. So as we contract with the city on various items with vendors outside of the city, this is where a lot of those costs come in.
Mr. Contreras has a question, comment?
The line 78, transfer to other funds, is that interdepartmental or not?
That's when we are transferring to other funds. Give you an example. If we transfer money out of the general fund to the street CIP or to another fund for purposes to fund something, maybe they expended something out. Another fund is like we have sent money to a grant fund because we actually had to cover the cost for the revenue in that fund. So this is where we capture the expenditures to other funds for various purposes.
Okay, so help to remind me, when when it's not interdepartmental moving of funds, but in fact what you're describing, does that require council approval?
In the budget, if it's already budgeted in the budget, then you approve it when you approve the budget.
No, not when. If, and maybe I'm reading this wrong, but and correct me if I'm wrong. When you're transferring those funds, you're usually transferring them because you need to support.
Right, we transfer them because we plan to. When we do it in the budget, it's transfers to other funds or things that we plan to do.
Okay, that's the difference. That's
so no, it's not out of the blue. No,
all right.
We do it according to the budget.
There's a full breakdown of what's included. So every line item you see here, there's a subcategory that we will provide when we present the budget with more details and examples of other expense and finances. And so what you'll see is, for example, in the current year, we will have the breakdown, and Jennifer may have it with her today, of what's included under other expense and finances. And so we will make sure we have that detail when we go into really the weeds of it. And you'll get a chance to see and decide. So for example, we've transferred in some cases to the streets fund because we don't have a set funding mechanism for streets. So last year, I think we had about 1.4 million for streets. Yeah. So what you'll see each time is we will tell you what we're recommending there. You may adjust it up or down, and we may adjust it up and down simply based on how much revenue we may have available in any given year.
All right, thank you.
Yes. And so you will get a detail, as she said, of all of those and what's involved in the transfers. Again, this is a breakdown, a pie chart of just showing you the expenditures, and we just looked at that. Here's the general fund proposed budget for 20, so you can take a look at from 22 to 23. You can see the difference, the revenue, the operational expenditures, and then we also look at the use of fund balance and the CIP transfer from this year that was proposed in 23.
I don't know if you understand what we have here is because we use our fund balance for projects, although the top numbers are actually balanced because we've had a practice in the past of using fund balance from the prior year, that's why you see a deficit. But what you'll notice on the actuals is we only transfer what is needed. So for example, although we may have had a budgeted amount that would have created a reduction in fund balance. The actual amounts in the past have not met that, and so that is part of why you'll see us say here is the use of fund balance for the CIP is 2.5. If you look at just the hard numbers, you see a different number. What we're doing this year, which is different, is that we don't really like the fund balance approach to it. So what we're trying to propose to you is that that fund balance number, that revenue and that expenditure are basically the same. And so that you create a positive, including the use of fund balance, which is really the use of revenue, because we don't want to give the impression of a negative budget, an unbalanced budget.
And there's that 268 sitting right there.
There it is.
Now, and what we will point out to you, we have started out particularly with our property tax. We will not receive our certified. We know that we're eligible for about a 3.5. We've estimated a 2%. And so some of these areas, as we found in our last year, we started out probably about at the same place last year and noticed that it would increase, because there are things that council will want to do, and we're going to have to look deep inside to make sure that we can cover them. And so the reason we present this as a baseline is because we want to say this is a worst case scenario for each. And that's what the 268 represents for us.
Okay, thank you.
So what we have here is that this just gives you an overview of what supplemental requests have been submitted by departments and the total. Overall, 1.2 million has been submitted by staff for new personnel. Also, there have been 9.3 million requested for facility improvements, renovations, and that type. Also, IT related or other equipment is approximately 260,000 that's been submitted for that. And COLA, cost of living, and tiered approach are 815,000 for all the funds are proposed over the whole city.
These are already included in what we just saw.
No, these are not included. These are not included. These are what has been requested as supplemental items. They are not included in the budget at this time.
And they're not all general funds. So
right.
Let's be clear, these are all funds. So
yes.
Some may be water, sewer, some may be economic, and funded through a number of areas.
Yes.
But the total amount with all funds would be that amount. And so we will evaluate them based on availability of resources.
Okay, and the new personnel costs are fully loaded as well, I presume?
No,
no.
Nothing on this. These are all
No.
the requests. What you saw at the beginning.
No, wait, what I said, those personnel costs are fully loaded in terms of all the benefit packages that go along with those amounts?
Yes.
Okay,
Absolutely.
yeah, okay.
Yes.
Total cost of employee.
Right, okay.
So on this area here, we talked about our objectives, and so I mentioned a little bit earlier, what are the things that we're looking at doing within this? We are in process of our compensation study and looking at benefits adjustment. We also, and I'm not sure, is there a slide on the COLA, or should I explain it here?
You can move on, I think, with it. Thank you.
No, there's not a separate slide.
So as we're looking at the cost of living increase, we're looking at a tiered approach based on salary, with the lower salaries receiving the larger amount and having 3 tiers, up to the higher level salaries receiving the smallest COLA. And so you'll see that proposal in more detail. Capital, our service center, we know that there's funding that is required to complete that, as well as our fire station, which are capital project and dollars we'll be talking about. Developing community safety programs, looking at building security and enhancing our network security. Those are 2 areas that are a priority. We've talked about it from the one-time funding, but we also recognize that we have our ARPA funding that will also be available for some of these areas. Community programs, we're looking at the funding of a special events position, possibly via economic development or other areas. The other area that we're looking at is a citizen academy. Minimal cost to it, but it's an opportunity to enhance. Neighborhood revitalization, looking at signage, as I mentioned earlier. Also customer service. We're looking at funding customer service positions. We have 1 existing and 4 new positions, and this would allow us to have customer service reps throughout the city reporting to the general unit, but so that we can make sure that we have people answering phones and their focus is just customer service. And last, one of the priorities that we were given was expand development and redevelopment opportunities. The community dog park has come up. We've talked about it. We have a proposal in that, and that is right now from a priority. Now from council, it's a second jab at it to tell us what things we're missing, and we would be interested prior to completion of the budget, what things that you don't see on here that you would also like to see included so that we can put a dollar amount to it. But as the mayor pointed out, revenues and expenditures right now are not in a massive excess. However, we're hoping that we will identify areas in which we'll be able to do some of our projects through alternative fundings.
So you had asked about shortages on our bond projects, and so this slide will give you an idea what those projects are. The Harrington Park shortage of about a little over $1 million. We have streets, and these are all part of the 2019 bond issuance. We issued bonds, but we are not able to complete these projects because of the shortage on the funding. And so it's over $4.5 million that we're short on all these projects in order to complete them. The sources that have been some savings that have been identified, as you listed in the other project savings offset. So you see that total to offset some of the costs, but we still have a shortage of around $4.5 million that we have to propose a solution to for us to keep those projects ongoing to complete.
On Harrington Park, because there's a $1 million deficit on that particular line item, we are not doing any work on Harrington Park?
Are we doing any work? I'm not sure where we are on the funding on the work for Harrington Park at this point.
Well, I just heard you say, or I thought I heard you say, that any projects that we have on this list that are in deficit, we're not going to do any work on.
We're saying that we're short right now, so we're not able to complete them.
There it is. Okay, so being short $1 million on Harrington Park, I have deep concern.
Yes.
Well, we don't have anybody. City manager, do you have any recollection of where the Harrington Park work is?
So what we're looking at, and I know that there is a restroom, and I think Jennifer, would you please step up?
There's restrooms and a very large concession stand, and also
and there's a bridge that's going to be from Waterview over into. There's also a pavilion that will be. But yes,
so
it's already been in the design is complete. It hasn't gone out to the street, I don't believe yet for the construction piece. But when they costed it out to have it all built, we're going to come up short to complete all of those things.
The reason I bring this up is that for the opening of the Duncanville Boys Baseball League, Mr. Stevenson was there with me, and I asked him, how's things looking for Harrington Park? And he says, when the season opens in 2023, Harrington Park will be complete.
Mr. Stevens is on the line, and I think if he may be able to speak to it.
So, Mr. Stevenson and I were in concert with that. Now, all of a sudden, I see this $1 million deficit, and I made a public promise based on what Mr. Stevenson told me that we were going to see that at the opening of baseball season next year. Now I'm concerned. So, Mr. Stevenson, bail me out here.
You bet. We are continuing to move forward with the consultant as well as our construction manager at risk, Dean Construction, to finalize the project. We're working hard to try to find any savings we can for the final design, the final guaranteed maximum price that we'll be coming back to the council with very soon. We're also working to work with potential subcontractors for the historically underutilized businesses. We're working with that with Tayo. So now I made the comments at the opening, we did not have at that time the estimated overage at that point. Now, still, as I said in my last quarterly report, when this came up, we still think we're going to be close. We're going to work really hard to make the concession restrooms be ready by next spring. Now, the bridge may not be complete, or the pavilion may not be complete, but we want to try everything we can do everything we can do to make as long as we find the funding, obviously, and we're working hard with our finance department to do that. We are working towards trying to make this happen.
Well, I'm comfortable committing to the concession stand and the restrooms, knowing that the bridge and the pavilion will be following on. But the key is what's right there in the middle of those baseball diamonds is what they're going to see. Okay. All right. Thank you.
Okay, we're going to take a look at the other funds. We're not going to take a look at all of them, but we are going to take look at some of the major ones. First is the sanitation fund. That's our garbage, where we have contracted out a vendor in order to pick up garbage throughout the city. We do take in revenue for those, for that pickup service, and also a pay for them in this same fund. So you can see that there is, for the budget, there's basically a 41% change in what's proposed and what's adopted as far as the total revenues and expenses. There's an increase in collections of approximately $109,000, and we're assuming an 18% increase in the landfill expenses. So this is one of those funds that we have to take a look at, as we running it very tight as far as revenues and expenses. A lot of this gets billed through the utility bills to our customers, and the rate at which we charge, we may have to take a look at it and see if there's a need so that we can actually balance this fund. Here's our motel and hotel fund for the year. The proposed, what we're planning on proposing for the 2023 year, $891,000 in revenues and expenditures of $843,000. We are trending up from the pre-COVID levels, and we've added some additional events for grants. We're offering grants for additional events. So we are trying to utilize some of the funding in the hotel and motel fund. I know economic development also does a lot of work with hotel funds in order to extend services to that group. The economic development fund, they are proposing increase. Most of their revenue is from sales tax. The portion that we talked about earlier, the total sales tax amount, the economic development part, it goes into the economic development fund, and they in turn help our redevelopment and development in the city. And so part of what is included in their expenditures for 23 is $1.5 million in revitalization incentives to the public. We have the Fieldhouse funds. They are projecting increases in beverage costs, security, and janitorial services expenses. I talked earlier about a lot of the supply chain is going through a lot of shortages, as well as increase in expenditures, and it's hard to get items. And so this has also hit the Fieldhouse very hard, as they're seeing an increase in expenditures. They do plan on trying to get their revenues is up. So with the planning of events that they're having, so that's what you see in this fund. Jennifer will go over the citizen survey with you guys, so you can take a look what the citizens had to say about what they want to see in the budget.
All right, as you may remember, that we have pushed out an online survey for the citizens to complete, to voice their, their opinions about the budget, as well as what will feed into the strategic plan. So just kind of overview of what the budget was, or the survey. We put it out there March 25th through April 30th. We did have an English and a Spanish option survey, and we received 93 total responses from the community. The first, one of the questions that I asked, and I know it's a kind of a difficult question when you're having to force rank, your priorities, but the intention was to just kind of engage and understand for citizens, what is what are the highest priorities to them. So this question was, to assist us in prioritizing the needs and financial resources, please rank the following service categories by what's most important to you. So not a big surprise that police service and fire services are going to be your top answer there, because safety is most important to most people. As you can see, again, police service being the highest and ranked. The second question, to show you, we started asking about the strategic pillars and focus areas. So what should our focus areas be in? So again, force ranking them, so please rank the following pillars and what's the most important to them. So reimagine high quality of life. That's where public safety falls in, arts, cultural, things like that. It's no surprise that that is the highest priority. As you can see, how the other ones rank.
Can I ask a question?
Sure.
Or make a comment? 93 responses.
Mm-hmm.
That is a statistically invalid population.
It's higher than here.
So an immense amount of time is spent, from what we see, looking at that information, categorizing it, preparing this for us. My thinking is, how valid is all of this data based on 93 individuals, based on our entire population who chose apathetically not to participate, or did we miscommunicate? Did we not communicate well enough? I'm thinking possibly maybe we can look at this by ourselves rather than you taking time to walk us through data that's been from 93 people. I think it'd be more effective for us to look at that and maybe look at another survey.
Sure.
In terms of how did we communicate, did we do it well enough? And knowing that 92 out of 93 were in English, one was in Spanish, we missed it somewhere. You know, so I'm looking at the manner in which we communicate. Maybe we can get a better response, I don't know. But I think it may be worth our while to just take a look at that and not to discredit all the work that you've done dissecting and categorizing those 93 responses, Ms. Odie, but I just don't know if it's worth our time to be spent going through every one of these charts based on a statistically invalid sample of a general population.
Councilmember Kuntz has his hand up.
Mr. Kuntz.
Thank you, Mayor. I personally would like to see what Ms. Odie is prepared for us, and I do agree that that number 93 is probably not a good sample, a representative sample, but I would like to see the rest of the presentation.
Well, it's all there for us. We can peruse that at our convenience if you wish. Council, looking for some consensus in terms of expediency and efficiency as well, not just for staff, but for our citizens as well. I believe we can dispense with going through, goodness, another 6 charts, which may not have any bearing on what's true or not. So, you know, if the rest of the council wants Ms. Odie to go through every one of these charts, I'm more agreeable to that. I'm just suggesting that possibly she doesn't have to, that we can look at this information by ourselves at a later date. Mr. Contreras.
I would agree with you, Mayor, but with this caveat, I think that this information should still be at least on our website, that the public can see it, because it may be of value to them, even though I agree with you that the low number of responses doesn't make it highly credible, but it's here for us to digest, and I'd like to make sure that it's placed somewhere on the website so the citizens can see it.
Sure, sure. Any other comments?
Yes, sir. How many more slides is it?
It's just 6.
Can we? I'd like to see it, sir, if that's okay.
Go ahead, Jennifer.
So I gave him some ideas of things like, okay, so the strategic pillar number 1, I asked a question about reimagine high quality of life. What 3 areas do you believe are the highest priority? Now, every citizen had the opportunity to, or the ones that participated could put in their own comments and even their own suggestion. These were just big topics that I threw out there. So again, no surprise, I think that 83% think public safety is the most important. And reading through the comments and the individual things that they remarked on, that's pretty much the theme. Public safety, police. perception, crime, things like that. So those, will continue to be a focus as we do the strategic plan as well as budget. The next item was cleanliness and litter control. The second pillar I asked about, emphasize government accountability, customer service. Which 3 areas do you believe are the highest priorities? Again, they were able to provide their own comments, but the highest one here is being ease of reporting issues, service requests, utilizing the website to be able to put in requests, things like that. Comments about customer service. So as Ms. Farrell Benavides did comment that we are working on a customer service program and how we can best provide the best quality and customer service to our citizens. Strategic pillar number 3, asking about promoting innovative ideas for development and redevelopment. The 3 most highest priorities there would be obviously attracting equity and projects within the community that can spur further growth. The next one on infrastructure improvement strategy, something definitely that we need. The 3 areas, do they believe the highest priority? Street maintenance was the top priority there. I got a lot of comments about Cedar Ridge in particular, but just sidewalks that don't exist in neighborhoods. They want more walkability where sidewalks don't exist, for example. And then the last one about the advanced marketing strategy of the city, to increase our efforts on social media, newsletters, things like that. So these are just how, staff, yes, it's not a good representation of the city as a whole, but nevertheless, some good feedback of things that we can intentionally focus on that can increase our services and how it gets out into the community and the information and communication. And then lastly, I just wanted to show you that, how they preferred to get their information. So over half that email newsletters, their preferred way of getting information. So just good information and feedback for the staff. So
Very well. Ms. Odie has complied with the council's desire to go through the rest of the chart. She has done so. Any comments or questions? Seeing none, business for tonight is completed. This meeting is adjourned. The timestamp is 9:20. Thank you and good night.